Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football and all things Giants football. I'm your host, Sal. This here is my co-host, Monty. What's going on, bro?
What's going on, Sal? Just watching the Raiders smoke the Chargers right now as we're recording this episode.
Clash of the Titans.
Shows how important Justin Herbert is to that team.
You guys are probably listening and watching this the next day. So tell us where we are. What's the score? 35-0, you said?
35-0 Raiders. Insane. We're,
Like,
we're only in the first. We're in the first half still.
for all the Justin Herbert slander, there you go. That's what that squad looks like without him.
Yeah, Staley's the worst. He's the worst of all time.
I don't know how that guy's going to survive all this.
He can't survive it this time.
All right, guys, we got another special episode. Last week we did our first round mock where we went through every pick of the top 32, including the Giants pick, which at the time was 6, or was it 7? I think it was 6.
It was 7.
It was 7. Okay.
So now we're 8.
Yep. Now we're down to 8 after our catastrophic victory on Monday night. We'll get into that.
It's not that catastrophic.
Dead. The tank is dead. It's okay. We'll have fun with it. Today, we're going to do a 7-round Giants mock. So the Giants have 7 picks. We're going to go through all 7. Well, all through 6. The Giants have 7 picks through, I believe, is it through 6 rounds? I believe so. Yeah. So we're going to go through all 7 picks. What we're not going to do is just kind of roll through the picks themselves and not think about other players. We're going to try to get into a little bit more detail as we tend to do. And as much as possible, we'll go over some of the options the Giants will have at each round, the thought process behind it, go through the mental exercise of how the board may shake out from beginning to end. So that should be fun. Before we get into that, there is some discussion going on.
One thing I want to say before we dive into this topic, Sal, I forgot to even mention it before the show, but if we're still thinking about doing a mailbag episode next week, we should mention, send us questions and, prospects you want to talk about this week, because we're discussing doing a mailbag episode next week. So if you have any prospects you want to hear about, any draft questions, at He's a Giant Pod, DM me or Sal, whatever works, and we'll look about answering those questions.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. We are going to be doing a mailbag. So please, a lot of you guys have sent in names of prospects. Please DM us again if you want to go over them. We'll have some time to look into the film and get back with something of an educated view on these guys for you. Or any other questions, just send it over to one of us. Again, Monty is at Montecristo at MONTECRI5TO. And I'm at Queens_guy, both of us on Twitter/X, or at He's a Giant Pod, just spelled out like that. And of course, thank you for all the support. Like, subscribe, but listen to us on whatever platform you prefer, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, whatever. But thank you guys. We love you guys. But let's hop into some Giants talk, man. So the Giants win the game on Monday night.
Yep.
DeVito sanity is in full gear. There you go. There you go. They come up to 5-8. The defense balls out again. Kayvon Thibodeau playing his ass off. Deonte Banks, tackling machine. Just damn good defense up and down. McKinney, another dominant week at safety. And Tommy DeVito makes the most of it, especially in the second half. The Giants win a close one, but they beat the Packers, who were favored by like 6 points going into that game. 3 straight wins, up to 5-8. I think we can officially kill the tank and say we're not getting up to 1 or 2.
Not organically.
And then so let's talk about that. Like, what does that mean in terms of draft positioning and what to look for, and how are you going to be looking through the next 4 weeks of this? How are you approaching this as a fan?
So I've totally taken my mind off of Caleb Williams and Drake May. I'm not saying it's impossible to get those guys, but I've just accepted that is more than likely not going to happen. There's still a chance, but I'm not focusing on that anymore. Right now, my attention is on QB3 at this draft, and I think there's a good shot we'll get a shot at QB3. Maybe you'll end up getting a shot at QB4, but I'm gonna I don't see a clear QB3. Some people may disagree, but I'm gonna continue to look into all these quarterbacks and try to hope that we go quarterback round 1 and see who's worthy of that. That's kind of where my mind is right now. What about you, Sal?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tankathon thing was really mainly about trying to get to picks 1 or 2, really, to get your hands on Caleb or Drake, or at minimum to maybe 3 to have, access to the asset that is the Marvin Harrison Jr. pick.
Yep.
Outside of those 3 picks, it's still a damn good class, but I think
Yeah.
I don't think you need to be too focused on whether you land at 4, 5, 7, 8. I think all that will sort of organically play out. The Giants will go in with their own needs and their approach, so I'm not too worried about it. And I'm just gonna enjoy the rest of the season, to be honest, and enjoy
Yeah.
the
That's
if
where
they.
I am.
I'm loving the defense. I've said this on Spaces. I think our defense is looking like a Super Bowl caliber defense, or at least it's on its way to becoming one. It has
Yeah.
the right approach. It takes the ball away. It gets pressures on quarterbacks. Gets sacks. Um, I think that defense is close. I think the offense needs what it needs to get up to par, and then this team can be a competitor, like a real legit competitor. So it's fun watching these young guys ball out, and it's fun watching the defense gel together. And I'm not
That's
gonna
fair
lie,
notice.
yeah, and it's fun watching the whole Tommy DeVito thing. Like I think it's just fun. I mean, some people are taking it a little bit too far, I think, but for the most part, if you're
Yeah.
enjoying it for what it is, which is a kid who's a UDFA free agent rookie who has no business being on that field, getting up there and putting on a show, and his local crowd loves him, and he's loving life. That's a good story. Enjoy it, really.
The whole NFL fan base is loving it. You see fans from all over the NFL getting in on the DeVito mania, and he's a fun backup. He's the most fun backup we've had since Jared
Yeah. I
Lorenzen.
mean, it's when was the last time the
R.I.P.
Giants? When was the last time the Giants got pressed for good reasons? Right?
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you think about it, we haven't had any all year. This is the first time we've had any good press for good reason. So whatever, enjoy it.
Exactly.
But that the other part of this is we're winning games, and just a week or two ago, we're talking about how it looked like the state of affairs was such that you know we were going to lose our coordinators because of whatever interpersonal reasons.
Yep.
Where do you think that stands now? Like, how are you viewing this after a few wins, and where we stand? How do you think this is all going to shake out? What would you like to see happen?
Sure. So, one thing we've talked about is, both of us were very focused on trying to get into a top 2 pick. That was kind of our number one focus once the season started going downhill. You can get one of those top 2 picks, everything else will kind of sort itself out, and whatever happens, happens. But if you can get a franchise changing player there, that's not happening anymore. And now that we're getting wins, and it's clear that our coaching staff is a huge reason we are getting these wins, I think no, we were always said we'd be really disappointed if we lost these coordinators, but I think it's becoming more and more important of a focus to keep them as we're winning games here behind, great coaching. I think it's gotten to the point where not only is it going to look really bad when you move on from these coordinators, if you move on from it's not just that you can't really scapegoat them anymore. These guys legitimately might be playing themselves into if they're gonna be off this team, it'll be in a head coaching position. Like they're getting back into those talks by how well they're coaching. I
Yeah,
mean, Wink Martindale has been good basically all year, but even look at what this offense is doing with Tommy DeVito. That will be based off of what they did last year. That's gonna get Mike Kafka some good press, and he interviewed for like every job in the NFL last year, and this is going to help him get back on those lists. So, letting either of these guys walk out the door into something other than a head coaching position would be a humongous mistake, in my opinion.
yeah, exactly. If they earn a head coaching job, kudos to them. You wish
Yep.
them well. But if they don't, they got to come back. I don't know what you got to do, Brian Dable. I don't know what you have to say. Um, John Mara, whether it comes I mean, it may just come down to money, and a lot of times it does. That tends to heal a lot of wounds, right? Sit
Yeah.
down with people, especially with Wink Martindale, and say, "Look, we want you back. We know you don't like whatever happened. We'll get it fixed, and we're going to pay you essentially like a pain and suffering tax and a paying a salary
Yeah.
to come back." I think that's worth it. You want to keep building what you're building with the same guy. So unless they get head coaching jobs, we have to expect our front office and head coach to retain their coordinators, other than McGahee and the coaches really other than Bobby Johnson. We can't
Mhm.
see the opposite where we lose the good coordinators and keep the bad coaches. Like it's got to be the other way around.
Yeah. And I think Wink is probably where we should start on this, and I think what you mentioned is kind of been my approach on this, where I think you need to give him the raise to hold on to him at this point. I mentioned to you, I tweeted it out this last week, and I mentioned it to you a couple weeks ago that I heard, and heard it in a few places now, but I heard from one of my buddies who has a source within the organization that Wink Martindale at this point is hoping that he gets fired so he can collect the rest of his contract and he plans on retiring. That is what I heard. I heard it from somebody else. I've heard um I don't know if Justin Pettick from Talking Giants has heard this as well, but he's alluded to this a couple times now on Talking Giants. I haven't asked him if he's hearing that anywhere, but I know I've heard it from somewhere that has a source in the organization. I heard it from somebody else who the exact same thing unprompted. So we me and you discussed this after I heard this. I believe it's probably true at this point, but I think there's a lot more that goes into this than just what he's trying to get fired or retire. He's clearly unhappy. You don't
Right.
just go, I'm gonna try to get fired so I can retire. At this point, it feels like he's like, look, if it's not gonna work out here, I don't want to move again. I just want you to give me my money and I will go. Like as he said in his press conference, we'll talk about too. I'm gonna go to take my golf clubs to Florida. So, what's your opinion on all that? We talked that a few times.
I mean, I've heard it now from you, and I heard Justin, like you said, say on Talking Giants. There's a few sources I've seen people comment about it on random things on Twitter. So there's some legs to this rumor. I don't know where it's coming from. It might, for all we know, it's coming from one portion of the Giants organization, and it's sort of being pushed out. And
Yeah, it could be that.
we just don't know. Um, let's assume though that it's true, like you said. Why would a guy who's really doing a great job and who's like a beloved coach, who's enjoying himself, want something like, to force the organization to fire him? It's probably because he thinks the job is toxic and he wants to get out of here. And he feels like it's not his fault that he's forced to leave and he wants to be paid. So if that's the scenario, that's a bad one, right? It's not on him. It's not on Wink. It's Wink. It's so bad for Wink that he just wants to get out of here, and he doesn't want to be punished by losing his salary. He wants to be paid out because he feels like he's being pushed out without being
Yep.
told, like in a way where they just want him to leave, and he doesn't want to just leave. He wants them to force him to fire him. That's a bad situation. So if that's true, it's true. It's still up to Brian Dable and Joe Shane and John Mara to remedy this one way or another and say, whatever happened, we got to sit down and clear the air and figure out how we can make this work because we have something really good cooking here. Like these players are developing. That defense looks really good. He's an integral part of whatever's happening. And as much as you and I both thought, man, that they really screwed up this roster, it's coming together and it's looking like a defense that could compete. You don't want to lose the key guy who helped put this all together like that. That not now, right? You just don't
They
want to
love
lose that
him
guy.
too.
Yeah, you don't know what the defense looks like without him. It's kind of scary when you go to all these guys developing. So figure this out. What else can you say? Figure it out, Brian Dable. Figure it out, Joe Shane, John Mara. Figure it out. Sit down with that man and make it work. If you can't make it work, that is an indictment on you guys.
Yep. And I think the other thing that again that kind of made me again believe, by the way, 42 nothing Raiders now. So there you go. First half still. But another thing that made me believe in this
Still the
rumor,
first half.
yeah, still the first half, 31 seconds left. Um, but the other thing that kind of made me believe this rumor is, where first time we heard Wink Martindale talk after all this Glazer stuff came out, and it seemed like he was, positioning himself to like, hey, give me a raise or I'm retiring. That's what it sounded like to me. Because when they were talking to him, he goes like, look, the same it's been for the last 22 months, which is the same another line that Joe Shane used. And I think I mentioned on here, like that seemed like a lawyer answer, like, yeah, it's always been like this, just it's always been not great.
Bad. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But losing's made it worse, which is what he's essentially said. But he said, like, yeah, I want to be here, but like I would love a raise. Don't we all want raises? He's like,
Right.
but also I could take my golf clubs and go to Florida at the end of the year. So I think, the way he kind of set that up is like, look, guys, you want me to stay, you gotta pay up. Otherwise, I have no problem just retiring. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm in my 60s. Like I'm happy to do that too. So, make your choice. So yeah, to me, I think you give Wink Martindale a raise. Say you did a great job, you earned this raise, but also here it is to like put up with this this stuff right now and give us a chance to get it right. Like it's for that as well. And Brian Dable ultimately has to get it right, man. Like, look, Brian Dable is a great players coach. We hear that all the time. That players love him. He builds these relationships with the players. That even though he's tough, that he has such a good personal relationship with these players. It doesn't matter. He's tough on them. It's different with coaches, and he needs to learn that that's not going to work with every coach, and you need to adjust your style as a coach to make it work. That's your job. And I likened it to Tom Coughlin, who lost the best player in his team in Tiki Barber, at least on his offense, and he had to look in a mirror and change his approach as a coach. He remained himself, but he changed his approach because it was becoming toxic to the team. So that's what Brian Dable has to do and they have to figure out a way to get these guys to give him a second chance.
It's on him, man. This is another test of a head coach, right? It's not the X's and O's sometimes. It's stuff like this. It's personnel management, personality management, coaching management. So it's a big test for Dable. We'll see what happens, but that's going to be the story that hits us immediately after the season's over. We're less than a month away, really, from a lot of these stories becoming like the big, big, big story because they're going to lead into the final week with this stuff.
Yep.
So buckle up. Um,
So one other
Anything
thing.
else? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
what do you feel about Mike Kafka? Where do you stand on his situation now?
Well, first of all, I think you know how I feel about him, particularly as a Giants coach. I want him to stay. I think he's done a great job. No matter what a lot of people try to sell, I think he's done a great job. Um, I I guess it was his camp that released the story that they were probably on the way out. Now it was like a while ago now, like a month. It feels like an eternity ago, and the Giants have been winning since then.
Yep.
And I think that does potentially change the possibility of him staying. But of course, that depends on certain factors. Like, why were the stories out that he might be going? Were they because he thought he was going to get fired because of the performance of the team and he was being blamed for it? Or did he think he's going to go because he doesn't want to stay here either? Kind of like the Wink
Yeah.
situation. I think I'm still not sure which way to go. He's a quiet guy. We're not hearing much. Um, I would say it's 50-50 that Kafka stays, honestly.
Yeah, probably
I,
about there.
I think it's coin flip, like whether or not he stays, and a lot of that maybe depend on what happens with Wink, to be honest. But with the Wink thing, we had said a few weeks ago we think it's 90-10 he's gone. Have I changed my mind on that? I think a little bit, maybe a glimmer of hope with what he said. That
Yeah.
you basically saying, "Hey, you want me to stay? Pay me a lot of money." So
Yeah.
I so maybe like 70-30 that he goes at this point, but I think
Yeah.
there's
That's
at
probably
least a
about right.
reasonable chance. Yeah. So I think it's 50-50 for Kafka, 70-30 for Wink. That in favor of them still not being here, at least well, even for Kafka, but 70% chance that Wink is not here. But that's better than what I thought a couple of weeks ago.
So the one thing I'll say about Kafka is, if Brian Dable wants Kafka gone, I think that's a mistake. First of all, that's different. But if it's a situation where Kafka just wants to make a lateral move, if this is toxic, like Wink, then that's a different story. But we haven't necessarily heard that. He might not be happy, but we haven't heard that it's like toxic. To me, you just don't let him make that move. He signed as a contract to be your coordinator, and look, that's just the NFL. That happens. I mean, like Brian Dable wanted to go to the Giants and be the coordinator of Joe Judge. The Bills let that happen? No. And there's been situations in the past that are like much worse than that before they opened up where you had to allow your position coaches to be allowed to interview for coordinator jobs. They used to be able to block that. I remember Stefanski, after Shermer left to become the Giants head coach, Shermer wanted to make him the offensive coordinator here, and instead they blocked that and then hired a different offensive coordinator in
Mm.
Minnesota. And it happened. He stayed. And he ended up the coordinator. There is Lafleur, Matt Lafleur. He wanted to hire his brother to be his offensive coordinator in Green Bay, and Shanahan said no. He said, "You're my passing game coordinator. I'm not letting you go." And he was allowed to do that back then. So, like, look, it might not like if he wants to leave and you stop it, like I know it's kind of like that's not the best culture, but at the same time, that's just kind of the NFL. You're not allowed to just take a lot of remove because you want to take a lot of remove. So
Right.
ultimately, again, Brian Dable needs to look in the mirror and do a better job at you know coaching, working with his coaches. That's a non-starter. But unless this is to like a Wink Martindale level toxicness, just because he would prefer to leave doesn't mean you let him go just for that reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think he has an opportunity to bring back both of these guys. And I
Yep.
think that should be the goal, especially if they do make the, I think, correct call of going and getting their own quarterback, because you want to have Kafka there to help develop the quarterback, and you want Wink there to stabilize the other side of the ball while that
Yep.
quarterback develops. You don't want instability on both sides of the ball. So I think it's imperative they bring them both back, or at least make their best effort to.
I agree.
You got
All right,
anything else
man.
on Giant News, or are you ready to go into this mock draft, man?
Yeah, I'm ready to do the mock draft if you're ready.
Let's do it. All right, so before we get into it, we're going to use the PFF module, their mock draft simulator. We're going with the standard setup for settings, which is basically, unless you want to, do you want to play with this at all, or do you want to leave it as is?
No, let's just leave it as is, the same one that everybody else gets when they do it. So, we'll just
Yeah.
kind of keep it where it is.
All right. The Giants picked eighth in this class, and like I said before, they have seven total picks. They have right now three in the top 50. They have their own first, their own second, and the Seattle second. And I think we're going to try to get into some detailed discussions about draft strategy, who we can take where, um, the kind of players they'll end up passing on. We're talking about that as we do pass on them. So we'll kind of organically see how it goes. But I think we want to make this a little bit more of a robust discussion of the athletes and the players that are going to come across at every position that we've drafted at. So do you want to hit the simulator and get started?
Yeah, so yeah, let's just dive on into it. All right, start the draft. All right. Got Drake May number 1, Caleb Williams number 2, Olafashano 3, Marvin Harrison 4, Malik Neighbors 5, Brock Bowers 6, and Jerzon Newton 7. So this is where we sit on the board. What's going through your mind now?
All right, so we know the top two quarterbacks are off the board. We know Marvin Harrison Jr. is off the board. We know. Now you said did Joe Alt go out too, or yeah?
Joel Alt's still here. Malik Neighbors is off the board. Brock Bowers is off the board.
All right, so Bowers and the two wide receivers, MHA and Neighbors are off the board. So all the blue chip prospects outside of Joe Alt are basically off the board at this point. Plus Serjan Newton, um,
Yep.
the defensive tackle from Illinois, who we both love, who is definitely the top interior defensive lineman in this class. We're at the pick. We're at the eighth pick. The top two quarterbacks are gone. You, if anybody who has listened to either one of us on this pod or on Twitter Spaces or on anything knows, we have been banging the drum. The New York Giants have a day one quarterback problem. At least I've been saying that over and over and over again.
Mhm.
I'm not going to change my view on that as we do our mock draft. The Giants have a day one quarterback problem. So any way you slice it, we cannot end this round without a quarterback. So strategy one, just take one right here. Strategy two, get cute and either take somebody else here or and try to trade back into the first round, or trade down from here and try to get your quarterback later. So before we take the pick, what do you think about any one of those strategies?
So, just in general, I'd say for the sake of this mock draft, we're going to avoid trades, but the discussion is still worth mentioning. The way I look at it is, for example, if we were at pick 3 and we couldn't get in the top 2, and we had no opportunity to take Marvin Harrison Jr., I'd obviously look to see what we can get in a trade back there. But I would have been fine with taking Marvin Harrison Jr., risking your court, knowing it's a deep quarterback class, risk losing a guy you prefer and paying, your two top 50 second round picks come back up. I think for a player like Marvin Harrison Jr. to team him up with a rookie quarterback, that type of risk is worth it, although risky and, not your ideal situation. But I think even for Malik Neighbors, but especially here with a guy like Roma Dunes or Joe Alt, I wouldn't make those type of risks for those guys.
Right.
I you could trade down, but if the idea is to trade down to get your quarterback, in my opinion, you just take your quarterback. That's how I view. You're not getting what are you going to get? A third to trade down. You risk losing your quarterback three. I don't see the I don't see the point here. How do you feel about trades here?
Yeah, I agree. I think there is a difference of drafting anywhere from 3 to 5 versus sort of that 6 to 8 range because you are going to miss out on access to the true blue chippers in this class. And when you don't have access to them, there's not much thought process here about trying to take one of them and trade back up and get somebody that's a dangerous game if you're trying to get a quarterback. You could still consider the trade down scenario if you're thinking, man, this is a deep draft class, and I don't have to drop far. Like I can go from 8 to 10 or 8 to 12 or something, and get an extra second round pick or something like that, right? Or something along those lines. Um, and I'm confident that my quarterbacks are not going to get taken in that area. That is a scenario that I can see play out, but I think, like you said, it's real risky. Like the value of moving down a few picks and getting a second round pick, it doesn't even come close to the potential harm of losing out on a quarterback you value here.
Yep.
So, from where we sit, I think the correct decision is just take the quarterback right here. So, I'm guessing we both agree here. Just take the quarterback at 8.
I agree. And, I want to let our listeners and viewers know Sal and I did not discuss what we're going to do for any other round, but we did discuss for the first round. And now we're saying for quarterback. I think, anybody who watched or listened last week, basically in the same situation, we went Jaden Daniels and we gave our reasonings why we like Jaden Daniels. We gave our reasons why we didn't, why we don't like him, and we still probably stand like he is as far as the entire draft community goes. He's gonna be looked at as the QB3, and he's probably would be the pick here. With that said, there's a chance he could go before this pick. He didn't in this situation, but I could easily see a team like the Raiders go for Jaden Daniels. They very much need a quarterback. Then also we kind of decided for the sake of not just repeating ourselves and saying the same thing we said to you guys last week, we wanted to go in a different direction this week. So why don't you tell them the direction we're thinking, Sal?
Yeah, we're gonna piss a bunch of you off. We're taking a quarterback. The New York Giants with the 8th pick of the 2024 draft select JJ McCarthy, quarterback, the University of Michigan. So this will piss a bunch of people off, but you and I are both higher on him, I think, than most of our friends are on Twitter and a lot of the consensus draft community. Um, why are we going with JJ McCarthy here? Well, number one, it's boring to do the same pick as last week. That doesn't sound too interesting. But mainly because we like the guy. So JJ McCarthy is 20 years old. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He has all the requisite traits and talent that you look for in a young quarterback, especially in one that you're going to be putting into a Dable offense. He's big. He's about 6'3", 6'4". He's not very he doesn't have a lot of weight on him yet, but he's gaining a lot of weight. He went from like 180 something to like over 200 something pounds this year. And like I said, he's 20, he's growing. He has an NFL arm. That's the biggest thing here. Um, he can make every throw on the field, and he can make it with oomph. The guy has a fastball. He has a heater that he can throw outside the numbers, down the field. So he can make every throw with incredible arm strength. He has arm talent. We've seen pinpoint accuracy from this guy on throws. He knows how to read and beat zone. By everything we hear, the dude is it's kind of like a playbook rat. Like he's a learner. His coaches love him. He has a lot of like at least the sound and buzzwords of like the intangible traits. But the reason we like him is because he has extraordinarily physical skills and traits. That's what we're betting on here. A young guy with an incredible arm, great arm talent, a lot of speed and athleticism. He can be a running option. He can be a passing option. He's the kind of player that I can see Brian Dable saying, "Give me that guy because I can work with him. I can coach him up. If I can coach up Tommy DeVito, what can I do with this kid?" So that's how I'm looking at it. What's your thought process?
Absolutely. Yeah, man. I mean, we'll get into some of the downsides of JJ McCarthy, but I think a lot of people, at least the way I see it, don't have an accurate view on JJ McCarthy. And I don't blame them because I had a very similar view of him before I really dove in. I think a lot of people basically because of his offense, I think, kind of see him as a game manager type who really lacks a ceiling. But I think that could be further from the truth to JJ McCarthy. Like JJ McCarthy has a hose. Like that guy can absolutely fire a football in. He reportedly runs somewhere between a 4.4 and a 4.5, and that does show up on tape. Like when he gets loose, he's a very, very quick player. He uses his athleticism to extend plays. He can make throws off platform, and he is a great deep ball passer. I mean, it's not just like the short to intermediate stuff with him. I mean, he has you can see it right here. He has a 92.9 deep ball grade. He has, let's see, an adjusted completion percentage of 59.1 on 20 yards or further. He has an NFL passer rating of 129.7. He has a big time throw rate of 27.7. Like he is a very good player throwing the ball deep, and that shows up. He's good at all. He's good at the intermediate level. You see here with a 91.3. He's a very good player who's consistently gotten better. And one thing I mentioned to you, and I think I've mentioned on another episode, is where I could see a pick like JJ McCarthy get taken. I think it would come down to, I think, similar logic that this team used when they paid Daniel Jones, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in the way that they didn't necessarily see it yet, and I didn't think projecting on a fourth year 25-year-old quarterback was a great idea. But when we're projecting here on a 20-year-old quarterback with traits, what they basically alluded to is like, I know this guy's going to put in the work. I know he'll be here every single day. I know he's a good teammate, all that stuff. I trust Daniel Jones the person. And I think when everything I've heard about JJ McCarthy, I think they will get a very similar vibe with that, where this guy, from everything I've heard, is just an absolute like w- workhorse. Like he apparently people were like, is this dude's like parents pushing him into this? And they were like talking like, no, like I try to like slow him down, but like he's just obsessed. He's been since high school. He's like wakes up at 6 a.m. and he's working all through the day. So like he has the NFL like work ethic already, and if you can get that to translate, I think that's something that will be on the minds of coaches when they talk to him.
I agree. I think that you're in short, you're just betting on the traits in the person here, and you're doing it with conviction. And this may age poorly, but he has the playoffs coming up against Alabama. If he has anything of a good showing there, and he gets his team to the national title game, his profile will rise. He's a guy who we believe that in the pre-draft process will rise, assuming he does declare. So
Yep.
I don't think it's insane. Like I know people are looking at this and saying, "Well, how can you take him at 8? He's going to be there at 30 something." I don't think so. If he
Yeah.
declares, I'm willing to bet he's a first round pick. And where in the first round is up for debate. These things can get funky on draft day, but he will be looked at as somebody who I think teams will view as somewhere between QB 3 and 4. So taking him in this range, I don't think is completely insane. But we did it mainly for the purpose of saying we're committing to the quarterback here. We've said it's a day one problem. Address it with the guy you want the most. Take him and then move on. So I think that's kind of all I have on JJ. You have any other thoughts on him before we move on to our second pick?
I want to talk just a little bit about the negatives to give people an idea. So some of the stuff that I saw about JJ that I do have questions about. One is the offense. That offense has not really asked JJ McCarthy to be the guy and take over games. That's going to continue to be a question until and if they ever allow him to do that. I think that is something that a lot of people are going to be worried about, and I think is a fair question to ask because I do think it falls more onto just how the Michigan offense runs, and he hasn't struggled when he's gotten the chance to take over games, like, but he doesn't get to do it for a lot or even the full game. So that is something to keep an eye on, and hopefully he gets that type of chance in the playoffs and we see it. Uh, there he is inconsistency to his game still. You can see some of these stats like Bowling Green. He threw 3 interceptions versus Bowling Green. Like he just had a bad game. He had a really bad game against Maryland. Like he's a young player and sometimes he doesn't look like he has it. And I think, to me, I give younger guys a benefit of the doubt that, you still continue to get better at being more and more consistent as you go through, but can he get there? Is that something where he's going to continue to have consistency problems? Then I don't know. And the last one, I actually, I talked to you about today, which I was, or yesterday, whatever, as I noticed, I was looking into JJ McCarthy's numbers on certain parts of the field. And he was really interesting how much he struggled going to the left side of the field, which is
Yeah.
something to monitor. Deep left, he did okay. I mean, he was 5 for 12, a touchdown. For going deep, pretty solid. It's not bad, but going intermediate left, so between 10 and 19 yards, he is 6 for 14, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, a 56.5 NFL rating. And then short left, he was only 16 of 22 for 0 to 10 yards. That's not good. 88.6 uh quarterback rating or NFL rating. That's not great. And then he didn't attempt a single pass to the left behind the line of scrimmage this year. Not a single one. Um and I mentioned I was talking with my buddies and I went back and I looked and I saw it because I mentioned to him and he's been watching the tape recently, and he mentioned how it seems like when JJ, even when he gets a completion, he's opening his body up when he's throwing to the left side, and leads to some inconsistency in his passes and some open guys. So that is something that is fixable, but needs to be fixed. I know you had something else that you noticed too with that, right?
Yeah, I think I told you this like a month or however long ago it was that we looked at the tape. I said he's pretty wild on those short and intermediate to the left. I meant to the left, but to those throws where he was just throwing heaters. A lot of
Mhm.
those incompletions get into the receiver's hand and they get dropped. And they're not necessarily the receiver's fault. The guy's throwing it like 100 miles an hour, like it's coming at them like it's on fire. And it can be a difficult ball to catch, because the guy, I mean, he's all velocity. He throws a lot of fastballs, and I noticed that he had that. So to me, that's a little different than like you're missing outside the numbers because you don't have the arm to get there, right?
Yeah.
Like there are guys who are inaccurate and miss on the outside the numbers because they're putting everything they've got to throw those outside the number shots, and they just don't have the strength or the accuracy when they do that. This guy's missing because he's just throwing the ball too hard. And like you mentioned, there are some mechanical things that need some coaching up, like just to make his base more like square and less movement and just a more consistent release. I think he'll fix a lot of these issues. But I do think he's gonna have to learn how to not throw the heater on every single throw. That's something that I think will have to be coached into him.
Yep.
But the other way to look at that is he has the arm talent to do these things, right? That again. I'm looking at the traits and saying it's all there. It's just a matter of are you going to put it together with the coaching?
Yep. And I think he's at a good place for his age. Like again, it comes down to him being 20 years old and he has a lot of room that still needs to grow. But Jim Harbaugh is a great coach and you can see it on tape where he does look well coached. You can see like in his like drop back, it looks very natural, it looks very smooth. He has a compact delivery, like he looks like a quarterback. And I don't think you're going to come in and have to turn around and unteach him like a ton of bad habits. There'll be some stuff, but with with other quarterbacks, I think you have to spend a lot of time unteaching things, and I didn't see that with JJ. I think
No,
it's more just
no.
continuing to develop him.
Yeah, I think just NFL development is really what we're looking for. We're not. I don't think we have to undo a whole bunch of stuff. All right, so the pick is in. So the Giants at the eighth pick overall select their quarterback. Day one problem addressed with their quarterback, JJ McCarthy from Michigan. We still got 6 picks to go, including two second round picks that are coming up. Um, the Giants second round pick right now. First second round pick is at their own pick at 40, I believe, right now. Um, and the
Yep.
next one is good. And the next one is the Seattle pick at 45. This may be, I don't know if this is off a little. I've seen 39, 44, but let's just do what they have here, 40 and 45. So at 40, we've taken our quarterback. What are our needs and who's on the board?
So, the way this is listed, it says quarterback. We already have that. Offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, D back. Basically saying we have needs everywhere, which I don't disagree with. In my mind, I'm looking at wide receiver. I think that's something I'd love to get a try at wide receiver one here. I would be open to the right offensive lineman here. I think there's a really good draft for offensive tackles, and if they have flexibility to come inside, I think that is something I would look at. Edge rushers, I think edge rushers is something that there's a pretty quick drop off in this draft. I think it's pretty top heavy with edge rushers, at least as far as I can tell. It's still early in the process. And then cornerback. I think cornerback is something that you should definitely be looking at here. I'd be open to other things based off BPA, but that's where I'm looking. What about yourself? Do you think
Yeah.
that's about right?
Yep. Again, another phrase I've had is it's quarterback day one and BPA the rest of the way. And for the most part, I feel that's the way we should do things. You should obviously consider positional value here and the strength of the draft class and depth. And these things actually do matter in strategizing this. The wide receiver class is very deep. You could conceivably skip on the wide receiver here and get him a few picks down the road. We're picking in 5 picks again. So, in my opinion, I'd narrow this down, um, depending on who's there, probably to the best wide receivers and the best offensive lineman and the best edge rusher. So who's on the board there? First start with the wide receivers. List
So
off the top wide receivers.
one thing I wanted to mention real quick before I get into that, I wanted to mention some guys that went off the board that I would have been interested in here but are gone. Leonard Taylor from
Mhm.
Miami is a very good upside interior defensive lineman. Tyler Newman, very good safety. AD Mitchell is off the board, very good wide receiver we could have considered here. Xavier Legette is a wide receiver we both really like at the top of the second. He is off the board, but certainly would consider him. Troy Fontenot's off the board. He's one guy that I know you and I very much would like to pick if he fell, but he did not. He went to the top of the second round, which you've mentioned concerneth. Is the further we fall in the first round, that sucks. But more importantly, you're missing out on the top of the second round. So Troy Fontenot fall goes early. Jalen Polk from Washington. A lot of good players here. Chris Braswell was an edge rusher I would have considered. Terry and Arnold, cornerback. So a lot of really good players went off, and I skipped some there. So it's tough. There's a lot of good players in this draft, and they go quickly. But like you said, so you want to start with the top wide receivers left?
Yeah, let's go with the top few guys left at wide receiver because we're
Okay.
5 picks away from our next pick. So let's play that game.
So Xavier Worthy, who we both had in our who we had in our wide receiver episode as a top 5 wide receiver going into the season. Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., Malachi Corley, Troy Franklin, Johnny Wilson. I'll cut it off there.
I think I'm comfortable with any one of those top 5 guys, honestly. Um, Xavier
Yeah,
Worthy might be the best pure receiver out of the batch. Uh, the downside with him is he's rail thin. He's the guy who's the Texas receiver who's rail thin. He's like a better, more amped up version of Jalen Hyatt, essentially, I would say. A guy who runs better routes and I think is a little more versatile than Hyatt, but has a similar frame, takes some big hits, goes flying. Do I want a wide receiver room that has both Jalen Hyatt and Xavier Worthy? I think it's at least a question you should ask. Like, do you want two guys like that of that similar size frame makeup in your room? We talk about how wide receiver rooms are often best built like a basketball team where you have different types of guys there. But it's a possibility because he's a good receiver. Lad McConkey is a great receiver out of Georgia, really versatile guy, plays inside, plays outside, very productive, over 3 yards per route run. A lot of the metrics we look for. I mean, he's the data loves him. He's when you watch Georgia games, he's solid. He's always around. He's finding spots in zone. He's a good receiver. You
I
improve
could
your
say
with your
I could see him getting like Puka Nakua comps being like the next Puka Nakua type thing this year. Very good.
It's kind of a modern day NFL receiver. We talk about that, right? I mean,
Yep.
Loud McConkey fits that profile. A guy who's very versatile and can run really good routes, gets separation, gets good yards per route run. And then the other guys, I think I'm very comfortable with. Brian Thomas Jr., the stud outside receiver at LSU, had a monstrous year this year. He's being mocked often in the first round, but I can definitely see him falling to the early to mid second. Um, who was the other one? Malachi Corley.
Malachi Corley and Troy Franklin.
Yeah, so Malachi Corley is baby Debo.
Really
Um,
is.
he plays like Debo. Everything is a screen. Everything is yak, and everything is him running people over. Great weapon to
Number
have
one in
on your
screen
team.
yards.
Yeah, great weapon to have on your team. Is this a guy I'm taking this early? Not really. Troy Franklin, very similar to Xavier Worthy from Oregon. Ex receiver, tall, skinny, 6'3", 185, I think. Slender frame for that size. Really good speed receiver on the outside. Has some issues with his weight and contested catches, but for the most part, he's a very reliable receiver on the outside, and he happens to be an outstanding route runner.
Yes.
I think
I'm a
he's
big
going to
fan of
get,
Franklin.
yeah, he fits your Devonta Smith profile.
Yeah.
So
It, him and Hyatt would be a fucking track team.
a skinny track
Yeah,
team,
but it
but
would be
yes,
skinny. It's not like I said. I think Xavier Legette would have been a great compliment here, but obviously he went off the board. So I'll say the way I'm looking at this right now, there's some really good options here. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like we could be addressing wide receiver 5 picks from now very easily and still be comfortable with the players on the board.
100%.
Um,
I agree. So who are the O linemen? That would be the next priority, I think. Right?
sure.
Who's left
So
here? And
so
we have very specific O linemen that we're looking for. We're looking for guys who can have versatility. I think that's important. Somebody who can play tackle and guard. Specifically, guys who we think would project well as good run blockers and at right tackle. So who's out there?
So we have Jordan Morgan. We both are big fans of. He was in our original offensive tackle episode.
He
Patrick Paul
definitely
from Houston.
Morgan definitely fits the role of the mold of somebody who can play tackle, but can also move inside to guard. He has the athleticism to be a guard in a moving offense where he's being asked to do a lot of zone blocks and move. So he's somebody I would consider here. Chris Paul, I'm sorry, Patrick
Patrick.
Paul. That's Chris, yeah, it's Chris Paul's brother, right?
Is
Um, yeah, I think he is. I think he's the brother of
really?
Chris Paul on the Commanders. Um,
Oh, I'm
the
talking about
lineman.
Chris.
No, 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 not that guy. The
I'm
Commanders,
like, he's
Chris
much
Paul.
taller than him.
Yeah, I think it's his brother. Um, he's a very kind of lean framed, rising offensive tackle. I don't think either one of us loved him in the pre-draft and the preseason process. I can't say I love him now. I think he's a good athlete. I think he's balanced and solid, and he has upside and projection. So I can see why teams would like him. Not what I'm looking for because I want somebody who has the versatility to play guard here, right? So I'm
And he's
not.
6'7".
Yeah, I'm not interested in that guy right now. Um,
Tyler Guyton. He was in our first round of our last episode of the
There's
32
another guy.
round.
Another guy's like 6'7", 300 and something pounds. Right tackle out of Oklahoma. Somebody we didn't talk about early, but we mentioned in the mock. Very good right tackle. Really solid, smooth feet. Technically pretty sound. Just another Oklahoma tackle that looks like he's going to make it in the NFL.
Ton of
Um,
athleticism.
yep.
And then the last guy I'd
Yeah.
mention is Kings. He's got another a really good athlete, but
The kid from Yale. Yeah.
no, BYU.
BYU. I'm sorry.
Yale's the next guy, but Kingsley Suma or whatever.
Hmm.
He's worth considering. He's supposed to be a very, very good athlete, but I don't know. I would say I'm not ready to commit to any of these guys, but if we're gonna take any, you and I are both big Jordan Morgan fans. I
Yep.
agree. He's somebody who I don't know. We've never seen play inside, but if I was gonna guess any of these guys move inside, it would be him.
I think his skills translate very nicely inside, and I think he can play on the outside.
So an-
So if we're going to take somebody, that could be it. Let's look at some of the defensive guys before we make the pick. Let's look at
yep.
the edge room and the cornerback room. Let's start there because pass rusher or cornerback would be valuable here. It's a good spot to take one.
So one guy we mentioned in our edge episode, JT Tuimoloau. Uh,
Okay.
he's the BPA right now on the PFF board.
Mm-hmm.
He had 4 sacks this year. He's a pass rush win rate of 14%, true pass grade of 72.8, pass rush grade of 78.1, run defense grade of 70.3. I think I mean, I haven't gone back and looked at his tape this year, but these numbers seem very reminiscent of what we saw last year. And maybe he's taken a big jump on tape. I haven't gone back and checked that yet, but he was very much just like a solid all-around player last time we were talking about him. But we didn't really see him as a guy who was going to be like an
A
alpha.
difference maker. Yeah.
Yeah, and I nothing here um makes me think that. I mean, I know Brugler was really high in him before. PFF's really high in him. I think he's going to be a really good football player, but I don't necessarily see the fit. And also, if we manage to hold on to Wink Martindale, he I don't know if I like him in a 3-4. I think he's more of a 4-3. The end. If we go and get Leslie Frazier, maybe this is something we consider more. But personally, not a huge fan of that pick. I wouldn't hate it, but it just I'm not the upside I'm looking for here. What about
And
you?
yeah, and I think this is where what they do in free agency is going to really determine how they may approach this here, because the free agency class, as we mentioned in Twitter Spaces and other places, is very strong at the defensive line. I mean, we have some really great defensive linemen and edge rushers who are hitting the market, remnants of that great 2019 defensive class in the first round. So you got guys like Brian Burns, Josh Allen, Josh Uche, Daniil Hunter. These guys are all going to be free agents now. Allen, we both expect Allen and Brian Burns to get franchise tagged, and then we'll see what they do from there. But you're not going to get them in access to them, at least on the open market, freely. Some of the other guys will probably be there. Specific Hunter will definitely be on the open market.
He has to be.
He has a no
Signing.
tag clause, right?
Yep.
So, you know, I would personally prefer the Giants get their extra edge rusher from that group. Invest the money in a guy for a few years. Pair him with Kayvon Thibodeau. Have Aziz Ojulari as your number 3, rotating guy. You got a good room, and you don't have to worry about it here. But even if they don't, Monty, I don't think JT Tuimoloau is worth taking the pick.
Yeah.
Right here for your edge rusher. So, um, I think
The
you're
guy.
basically down to Morgan and the receivers and
Well,
the cornerbacks. Go ahead. Well, who are the cornerbacks for here?
so there is one guy that I really want to talk about. So the top cornerbacks here are TJ Tampa, who I believe we talk about TJ Tampa? I don't remember if we talked about him or not.
We did not bring him up, but we considered going over him because he was such an athletic freak.
TJ Tampa, 6'2", 200 pounds. He's a very, very, very solid player out of Iowa State. He has that length that you look for. Um, he, I'm trying to remember all the stuff on him, but he 10% most drafted by the Giants here. Interesting. But I have another guy personally. I have my eyes on at corner if we're gonna go there, and this was my guy when we did the cornerback episode, and that's Quinion Mitchell. Quinion Mitchell has the highest grade among corners by PFF for 2 years in a row now. Obviously, plays at a smaller school, which is a huge reason for that. Um, he leads college football in forced incompletions for the second year in a row. He did the same thing last year. And there's something to be said about guys who consistently get their hands on the ball. At one point last year, I believe Quinion Mitchell either had 3 or 4 interceptions in one football game. Uh, he is a fantastic athlete. He made the Feldman Freaks list. This guy is somebody who Brugler put in his first round and going to the I don't forgot who he had going to, but going in the first round of his mock draft.
Yeah, I think I had him going to the Eagles.
Is 6 foot, 196 pounds. This guy is somebody who I imagine will I would imagine would go to the Senior Bowl, and if he goes to the Senior Bowl, will be a big riser because somebody who, when you see him going against competition of his level, I think he'll continue to dominate because he is, from everything I've heard and tried to see, not a ton of tape out there on Toledo, believe it or not. He looks like a very good player. This that is one that interests me. How what's your opinion on a Quinion Mitchell type player here?
I would strongly consider Quinion Mitchell here. It depends on if Wink Martindale is still our head coach or our defensive coordinator. I think that's part of the decision making. I think it also depends on how they view these guys on, later in day 2 or day 3 in terms of trying to get a cornerback too. Like, do they think there are guys out there who they can move over? Or, this class is very strong in nickel corners. So do they view Cordell Flott as somebody that can slide over to the other outside corner? They flirted with that idea multiple times. So it depends on how they view their current group and how, you know, really how they might approach free agency to some extent, um, and the rest of this class. So as much as I'm intrigued by him, I don't think I would pass up on the receivers or the linemen here because I do think there's a bit of a drop off in the talent, especially at linemen, for what our needs are as we go past this point.
Oh,
So I'm kind of
okay.
leaning towards either receiver or lineman here. What about you? Are you leaning towards cornerback?
I would probably lean towards Quinion Mitchell or Jordan Morgan. That's probably where I'd lean at this point because again, we can wait a little bit and get that wide receiver the next pick, and I'm good with committing it there. But to me, I'm trying to decide between Mitchell and Morgan. I'll say one more thing on Mitchell. I pulled it up because so he was 46 on the Feldman Freak list. He is 6 foot 200 pounds. He benched 225 21 times. He squatted 440 pounds and he had a top speed of 23.58 miles per hour on GPS this summer. And he ran the 40-yard dash in the 4.3 twice in front of NFL scouts. He's going to test off the charts.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
he'll probably go in this range, late first round, early to mid second. Like that's probably where he's going to be.
So what do you think? I'm good with
You're partial towards
say
him?
I would say Mitchell or Morgan. I'm fine with going Morgan if you're leaning Morgan and wide receiver.
I think we can win on wide receiver here because we're picking in 5 picks.
Exactly.
Um, and so who's picking after us? Let's take a look at the board. Between the 40th and the 45th pick, we have, let's see.
Titans, Chargers, Falcons, Eagles.
Yeah. So there's a couple of teams in there that could use a lineman. You know,
Mhm.
the Titans and Chargers specifically could use a lineman, and Morgan could fit them very nicely, especially a tackle like Morgan. Um, I personally think that I would take my lineman here, and I know this is not a very deep class in outside corners, but like I said, I think I have to trust that Wink Martindale is going to know what to do with these guys. That Jerome Henderson's going to take some of the talented guys you can get on day 3, including maybe a really good nickel corner and slide Cordell Flott over and try it. You don't have to fix everything here. You don't have to fix the whole team in one draft. You got to go BPA. In my opinion, BPA positional value, Morgan is near the top of that list here. He's a
Yep.
smooth left tackle. He can kick inside to guard. We could use a guy who can do both of those things, right?
Yep.
Especially if we're taking a new quarterback. I think you want to solidify that line, have more talented players to work with, and hopefully we have a new coach. So my vote here is Jordan Morgan, Monty.
Sounds good. I'm fine with going Jordan Morgan. One more thing I'll mention before we put in that pick is similar to what you said with Edge. I think is a very good free agency class to go out and get a guard with some tackle versatility. We've mentioned a Micah
Yep,
Wenwu. We've mentioned a Robert Hunt. So if you went out and do that, that might change my opinion on the pick here.
absolutely. Yep.
But for this case, we'll just go ahead and pull the trigger on Jordan Morgan.
Yeah, it's hard to do this without knowing what they did in free agency. But that's a great point. You would approach it differently. So let's take Jordan Morgan there. So now our top 2 picks are our quarterback, JJ McCarthy from Michigan at in the first round, and we have with our first second round pick, we have his new right tackle, presumably Jordan Morgan. He played left tackle in college, but I think he's very translatable to the right side. He's got a good balance, or he could play left guard.
And Jordan Morgan was number 3 on our offensive tackle on our episode that we did a couple months ago. Some of the things we mentioned for him, we said he had a good zone scheme fit. We said he plays low, he anchors well, is a good punch, he has competitive toughness, he moves well, natural balance and flexibility. Worth mentioning, he was injured a lot early in his career. He had injuries 2020, 2021, and 2022. He had an ACL in 2022. He's been healthy this year, so that's good.
Right.
Um,
He's got to pass the medicals for them to take him this high.
Yep, he's pound for pound really strong. Doesn't always have the best pop, but maybe more of a technique thing. Active hand, anticipates defenders' hands, doesn't wait for defenders to come to him, anticipates stunts and twists, lateral agility versus inside move. He can destroy on pulls, and it has more of a wind up on his punch. So those were some of the notes I had from our offensive line episode. So just to give you an idea of New York Giant Jordan Morgan.
Perfect.
Okay.
All
Um,
right. Let's go to the next pick then. So did you enter the pick?
yep. So
All right.
who
So
went
who went
off the
after us?
board?
Yeah.
Xavier Worthy was the next pick. JT
Okay.
Tuamala was the pick after that. Carson Beck, then Landon
Interesting.
Jackson.
Okay.
So,
So the wide receivers are largely still there.
yep,
And so is your cornerback. So now it gets interesting. So the wide receiver, can you just recap who's still on the board from the wide receiver room?
sure. So from the wide receiver room, we have Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., Malachi Corley, and Troy Franklin.
Okay. Out of that group, the Giants have a speed receiver already who is developing his route tree in Jalen Hyatt. And I think he's a guy who can play in the slot and kind of play like that Z type role. Um, I don't think I'd view him as a true X receiver on the outside all the time. More of a versatile receiver where he lines up. You have Mondell Robinson, who has become just a real weapon as a slot receiver. Um, Amazing route runner right now, and he's picking up tons of yak. He's showing you what his skill set is and why a lot of us liked him coming out of Kentucky. What the Giants are really missing is an X receiver here, a guy who can stretch the field and be strong at the catch point, a guy who can run some good routes, but really kind of occupy the number one cornerback on the other team. There are two guys on that list who stand out. One is Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, and the other one is Troy Franklin from Oregon. Would you agree? Those are the two guys you'd be looking at here.
Those are the guys. I mean, they're both, a little bit more slender players. Troy Franklin more than Brian Thomas. So, but I think they both can fill that role, especially if they can build out their frame a little bit more.
So, out of the two, I think we're gonna have a different opinion on who we would
I
take.
agree.
I would probably take Brian Thomas Jr. here.
So I'd take Troy Franklin. I'll tell you why, and I'm open to both. I'm a big fan of both players, and I'll play a little bit to something that you feel for wide receivers too. I think Troy Franklin, from what I've seen, is a much better route runner, and
Yep.
I lean on route running in wide receivers. That's probably my number one trait I look for in these guys. I think for a guy of Troy Franklin's size of 6'3", 187, and yes, he's very skinny, and that probably plays into why he moves so well, but he moves very well for a guy of his height. He has incredible production. 1,383 yards and 14 touchdowns. All the metrics are there for him. He's one of the best deep ball receivers in the country, as is Brian Thomas. 3.32 yards per route run. He does have some contested catch rate issues, some drop issues. So that is something worth considering against him. But although he does have a lot of similarities to Jalen Hyatt, they're both very thin, kind of taller speedsters. I think Troy Franklin has has the route running to really come in and be an immediate difference maker in the NFL. I just think he's a better player, but I think they're both really close. So why would you go Brian Thomas here?
Mainly because of the whole basketball theory of the room, that you want a guy who fits that X receiver mold here if you can get him. Brian Thomas is 6'4", 205, bigger, stronger guy than Troy Franklin, more physical in his play style. I would say he's
Yep,
still a good route runner. I don't think he's a bad route runner. He's a good route runner. He's
certainly
not as
not.
good as Troy Franklin, and he's not as explosive as Troy Franklin. But he's the guy that runs down the sideline or runs posts, runs crossers, and he's dragging the safety. And you can throw him a competitive ball. He's very good at getting those competitive balls.
Yeah,
And in the NFL,
58.3 contested catch rate, really good.
right? And I think we lack a guy like that unless Darren Waller stays healthy. And we don't know what the future of Darren Waller is. I think we definitely like a guy like that on the outside. So that's what I'm looking for. Although I like your theory of the case that you fill your roster up with guys who can run routes.
Mhm.
You do need guys who are versatile and can run routes and do things with some precision because we just drafted a quarterback whose calling card is going to be precision accuracy against zone and things like that, right? That's kind of his game. And he has a strong arm. So having a guy who's going to be where he needs to be is very important. So I'm good with either one. I kind of pushed on the Jordan Morgan pick on the last one. I'll let you have the last word on this. I'm equal on either one of these guys. So if we're gonna take a wide receiver, if you want to go with Troy Franklin, I think that's a solid pick here.
Yeah, I'm definitely torn here a little bit, but I kind of do hear you out there, and he's a bigger guy with the contested catch rate. That's something uh that Troy Franklin kind of lacks from his game. And although I am going to take the route runner in most occasions, like you said, Brian Thomas is not a bad route runner. This is not Jordan Addison versus Quentin Johnston here, as I see him on my screen. These are two very good players, neither of them who seem to um lack ability as a wide receiver, and has had a ton of success. 1,079 yards and 15 touchdowns as a clear wide receiver two on his roster. He still produced like that. So I'm fine going with Brian Thomas here. Let's go ahead and put in Brian Thomas, and we'll go into the third round.
All right, before you do you want to look? Would you take Quinion Mitchell here? I mean, you made a case for him. Um, 4 picks earlier. He's on the board. What do you think about just taking him?
So Quinion Mitchell is a really good pick here. I mean, I think he's a guy. I think out of all the guys that we've talked about so far, he has the most star potential. I think more than Jordan Morgan, more than JT Tuamolo, more than Troy Franklin, more than David Worthy, whoever. I think Quinion Mitchell obviously has some floor problems too because of the competition he's played at, but he's an amazing athlete. I imagine that he's going to translate. Certainly a guy that I think is worth considering here. But if we feel like wide receiver is a big need, there's multiple good choices here as we talked about. The question is, I think partially, we wait to the third round. Are there players that we're interested enough in waiting? Can maybe a Johnny Wilson make it? Would we be interested in a Tez Walker? Would you be interested in a Jalen McMillan, a Roman Wilson, a Ricky Parcell? Um, how would you feel about those players being the top wide receiver that you take in this draft if we skipped out on it here?
I would be fine with a lot of those guys at the top of round 3 if we decided to go defense here. But I will acknowledge one big important thing that I think Troy Franklin is better than those other guys. He's a better route runner and a more explosive player. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that I criticized Dave Gettleman for is he drafted Daniel Jones. He identified him as his guy. He had just traded Odell Beckham Jr. away, and he had a chance to draft, one of many, many good wide receivers still on the board. And he took Dexter Lawrence at 17, which ended up being a fantastic pick. But then he traded up from the second round into the first round to take DeAndre Baker. And the players he passed up on are guys like AJ Brown and Debo Samuel and DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin and Deontay Johnson and on and on and on. I think it is important to pay. I know it's painful, right? You think about it.
Yeah.
Um, I think if you're committing to a young quarterback here, you would be remiss to not get a high end talent wide receiver for him. And I think if you believe that a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. completes your receiver room or makes it more complete, think about the receiver room you'd be handing this kid coming in, right? Because this draft is basically about this quarterback. It's about getting him and then building the team around him, at least starting to build the team around him. You've added a tackle now who can play and handle his front side at right tackle, or be a swing tackle if need be, or play guard. So you've improved the O line room, hopefully, right? You've added some talent there. If you add a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., in my opinion, you're creating the basketball team. You're giving the kid the big target over the middle in Darren Waller. You're giving him the H back in Daniel Bellinger. You're giving him Saquon Barkley. I think he's going to be here. You're giving him the speed receiver down the field in Jalen Hyatt, the route running slot specialist in Wandale Robinson, and now you have the big physical outside receiver in Brian Thomas who can win in both speed and physicality. That's a pretty complete room, right? I mean, if you think about it, that's a pretty complete room, and I think you'll very quickly be able to assess everything about this quarterback once you get him out there. Can he read defenses and can he make use of these weapons? You're not going to have to wait 5 years again to figure this out. I think you want to try to get this guy his weapon. So long-winded way of saying, I think, of saying, get the kid his weapon right now and finish
Yeah.
up this room.
Yeah, I think you sold me. I was starting to lean back to Quinton Mitchell, but you really made the case there that you support the quarterback when you just drafted him, which we did. We spent our a very high pick on him. Do one thing just to chew on a little bit here that I was thinking while you said that. Um, and this might just be fanfare, and this might be irrelevant, but just something I thought of. A player that I mentioned who I really like, if we waited here, is a guy in Roman Wilson, who I
Yeah.
think probably is more of a slot guy and is more a speed guy and probably doesn't fit the basketball theory as well. But is JJ McCarthy, who we drafted's number one weapon at Michigan, is that something that you would consider as just the
hmm
having the natural connection there? Or is
Yeah.
that more just like, oh, that'd be cool, like, but it doesn't really matter that much?
I think I would consider it, but I don't think I would consider it over a higher end talent like Thomas. And I
Yeah.
do think Brian Thomas is a significant upgrade in talent versus Roman Wilson, at least right now as a prospect. So I think JJ McCarthy will be just fine with Brian Thomas as his outside receiver.
Let's pull the trigger. Let's grab Brian Thomas. We spent a lot of
All right.
time on that pick, and I think we all good conversations. Quinion Mitchell, the next pick to the Rams.
There you go. All right, so let's take a break for a second. So we had three top 50 picks. We got our quarterback round one. We haven't traded anything yet, by the way, guys. Took our quarterback that we have conviction in, and JJ McCarthy in the first round. We took his new tackle slash guard potentially to upgrade the room with the next pick in the second round, and we took a new wide receiver to complete the room with the next pick. So in literally in three picks, I think we've hit some major areas of deficiency for this organization, like right off the bat. And I'm assuming going into this that our defense stays somewhat intact in terms of the coordinator status, and we're still building on it. And hopefully, they make some investments in free agency to improve it. But now we are in a position to really just start going BPA, right? And just build out this roster, make it a damn good roster. I think it's beginning to come together. So we still have four picks to go. So our next pick is, I believe, somewhere in the 60s, right?
72.
Oh, okay. We're all see 72. All right. So this is the top of the third round. Um, we haven't gone defense yet. Let's hear what we've got at the top of the board here.
So here's some names that scream out to me when I see him right here. Trey Benson was one of our top running backs. He's here at the third round. Jeremiah Trotter, who was both our
Ooh,
linebacker one, is sitting right here. Johnny Wilson. I think we already
mm,
went a wide receiver, but worth mentioning if we didn't go wide receiver,
he
no,
would
you
be
got
here.
you. This is a prototype guy. He has his issues. He needs to develop still, but 6'7", 237 pounds. This is probably the tallest wide. I don't even think probably I think is the tallest wide receiver since Harold Carmichael. Like very very physical guy. Has some drop issues, but he's the prototype as of the big wide receiver. He's a basketball team if theory for sure guy. But that's why we didn't pick him last round because he's still here. Then the other two people who pop off here to me, Rook Aurora. Um,
Interesting.
he was on our interior defensive line episode. And then Jack Sawyer. And Jack Sawyer, unlike JT Tuamola, his numbers have been great this year for an edge. He's pass rush grade 86.8, run defense grade 87.1, true pass set rush grade 84.7, pass rush win rate 17.4%. He has 5 sacks, 9 QB hits, 16 hurries. He's had a really, really good year and it's kind of taken that next step. And he's out kind of that all-around player, and I think in a Wink Martindale system with his versatility, if he's still here, That's definitely a guy worth considering. But
Mhm.
anyway, what what are some names that popped off to you here?
So Jack Sawyer definitely pops off. Arugaro, Jeremiah Trotter. I think this is going to depend on who's our defensive coordinator.
Yeah,
I
I
really
agree.
think that's really going to affect this pick here. If we need a third linebacker that is in a 4-3 type system, I think the pick is easily Jeremiah Trotter Jr. here.
He's the clear BPA to me. I mean,
Yeah,
this was a guy that we loved,
right.
absolutely loved when we did this. His teammate Barrett Carter was number 1 on our in our linebacker episode just because we tried to do consensus, but me and you both talked about with Jeremiah Trotter. He was R1. We saw him. I mean, his father was an NFL player, and you can see that in his game where he plays so instinctually, and he has the linebacker frame. I had some notes on he fills lanes low with power. Great fundamental tackler. Sniffs out screens. Floats well in zone coverage. High IQ. Plays calm. Not a great athlete, but and lacks some height, weight and length, but like just a very solid all around football player. So really, really like Trotter, but I think we have to kind of decide here if we think Wink Martindale is going to be here or not, and if we make that pick.
So defensive lineman, the best player available sounds like it's Rugaro. Worth mentioning, he was also on our list. Another Clemson player like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. He's a pretty classical three tech, 6'4", 295, little undersized for defensive lineman, but a good three tech. Very athletic, very agile, gets into the backfield, gets skinny and gets in there. He's just solid. I don't think there's anything explosive or elite about him in terms of traits, but I think this is a very solid defensive tackle. So if you wanted to pair Dexter Lawrence with a guy who can just be a solid three tech, who can, be an all around three down lineman, Aurora, you could make a strong case for here.
Did
Is
5
he good?
sacks this year.
He's really good, for a defensive lineman. So you're talking about improving your pass rush. I think forget about this position. How can the Giants improve their pass rush at this position? Because I think this is an ideal place to start thinking about that. Um, I think between Rook Aurora and Jack Sawyer, it's a tough call. Um, Again, it comes down to how they handle things, but I'll tell you what, as I'm sitting here talking about it and thinking about it, I'm thinking about the best teams in football. They don't reach for need. Um,
Mhm.
they take the best player available, right? And they say, we'll figure it out. Like we just have a great football player. We'll put him on our team. We'll figure it out. We can trade people. We can move guys around. But just talent is talent, right?
Yep, and needs
I
change very quickly.
Needs change quickly, but talent is talent. My vote goes to Jeremiah Trotter Jr. here.
I think that's where I go to, but I do have one more guy that I noticed that I wanted to bring out to you. We mentioned Rukororo, who we talked about on our original episode. I'll mention some notes for our listeners here what we had on him. Let's see. He we said he was started playing football in 2017. He was a basketball player before. He had a sack in the Orange Bowl. We had a little bit less notes on this guy, but he was, a guy who was kind of newer to the game, was still developing. But another guy from that episode I just noticed here. And this guy, we called an Andre Patterson guy in that episode, and that's Mason Smith from
Hmm.
LSU. Um,
Okay, so he's on the board. Yeah.
6'6", 315 pounds. He was let's bring up some of the notes on him. He was a 5-star recruit. He was second only to Leonard Taylor in his class. This guy, had a really good freshman year, and then I believe he dropped off. Let's see. Yeah, or no, that wasn't him. I'm thinking Smith. Regardless, Mason Smith is a
Oh
pro
no,
recruit.
he tore his ACL in his sophomore. Remember
That's
his
right.
first game? He had a phenomenal first year, and then it's coming into his sophomore year. Whenever he was looking for him to take the leap, in his first game against Florida State, he tore his ACL.
That's right.
uh,
Yeah, and he had a
or
good
a
year as
Florida,
a
Florida
freshman
State. Yeah, yeah,
for a freshman. I mean, he was only a 57.2 PFF grade, but as a true freshman who's getting snaps, he had 4 sacks and 12 hurries
right.
from interior defensive line position.
Hmm.
And it looks like he's had a pretty good year. I mean, he struggled in run defense, but he had 8.8 pass rush win grade, true pass set rush grade of 81.6 and 74.8. One thing we mentioned with him was that this is one of the guys that, Andre Patterson's clearly really values height in his defensive lineman. You've seen it with DJ Davidson, you've seen it with Jordan Riley. They value height and weight in these guys. And as a 6'6", 315-pound guy, Mason Smith is truly somebody I would love for Andre Patterson to get his hands on.
Yeah, it's an interesting and intriguing thought. Um, Here's my argument against it. We're watching the post Leonard Williams experiment at defensive line right now play out. It's really not bad. You're watching the rotational guys, the rotation of guys like Ashawn Robinson and Nacho, DJ Davidson before he got hurt. Like these guys are coming in and they're handling their job next to Dexter Lawrence, and Dexter Lawrence missed a couple of games, with the injury. They're doing just fine. I think Andre Patterson is such a great coach. Like it's intriguing to think about what he could do with a talent like this, especially Mason Smith would be in his second year removed from the ACL tear. That's usually when these guys get their legs back underneath them.
Yep.
So it could be intriguing. And if he was healthy this year and he performed better, this guy might have been a first round pick. So you might be getting value here. Um, I still don't think he's the best player on the board.
Yep.
Um, and I would argue that we didn't talk about the corners. I think that's one group we didn't go into here, but sounds like they're probably a little bit weaker here. Um,
Yeah. Nobody's jumping off the screen at me.
How about safeties? Or you looking at DBs? See,
Billy Bowman from Oklahoma. Uh, Tyke Smith from Georgia. Yeah, nobody's really jumping off the
is
board.
is Mike Sanders still on the board here at 72?
Not that what,
He might be listed as a corner as a cornerback.
not that I see.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Mike Sanders still is a Michigan cornerback slash nickelback. He
Oh
was
no,
a wide
no, he
receiver.
is. He's very far
Okay.
down here, but he's here.
Where is he listed on their board?
ADP of 152.3, rank 162.
See, I think that's wrong. I'm
Okay.
pretty sure he's going to go before that.
Keep an eye later in this draft. Maybe we get a sleeper.
Yeah, I don't think it's realistic, but it's possible. I don't. It's possible. So Mike Sanders still is an interesting guy because he's one of these guys who's a converted wide receiver to DB. He plays safety, he plays cornerback, and if you've been watching Michigan's last few games, he's really been coming on and dominating. He's making huge plays, getting turnovers, getting big hits. In this Wink Martindale defense, like adding a nickel back like him. We talked about the cornerback need. This is not a great class for outside cornerbacks, but there's a lot of good guys who are these nickel type backs, and Sanders is one of them. So I can hold off on him here if the board allows us to, but I think realistically he'd be going somewhere around 72 to 96, like in that range. Like he's probably going, in the third round somewhere. Um, but it's somebody to keep an eye on because that improves your defensive backfield also. But again, getting back to our original argument, the best player available approach is always a sound one here. You're gonna thank yourself years later when you acquire talent. I'm still solid on Jeremiah Trotter Jr. here.
And there's a very good chance, like we said like a 70% chance that Blake Martindale isn't here. And in that case, it's probably likely Leslie Frazier, who runs a 4-3. And you've seen how important linebacker is in that defense. That linebacker is such a big part in Buffalo. So Jeremiah Trotter, bringing him as the Mike there and letting Micah McFadden and Okereke kind of run around, that would be a great linebacker room.
Even if it's Wink Martindale, man, this guy can blitz. He can be a very useful player. And I think that Wink Martindale would be creative and learn how to use these guys.
I
So
agree.
I'm good with him. So that's pick 72, I believe, right?
Yep, pick 72. I love the value there.
Yeah, and this is where we start talking about just getting great players. So our next pick is at 108, I believe. Am I
108 and uh an unfortunate what I just saw here. My guy I've called running back 1. Bucky Irving went 105 to the
mm,
Chicago Bears. So that's the guy I would have been pounding the table for here, man. But there's still a lot of good players left. I'm not worried about it. So I wanted to give you some names that jump off the board to me here. One, we could still go running back here. New Jersey's own Audric Estime. He he would be a great running back pick here. Desir Stackhouse, really more of a nose guard, but a very good defensive lineman. Cedric Van Prant, we already kind of went offensive line, but very, very accomplished center. And then Zach Zinter, who, he had a horrific leg injury, but was our interior offensive line one going into the season. And Trevon Henderson, Ohio State. I believe he went back to school, so I think we can take him off. And then Michael Hall Jr., another guy who made our interior defensive line episode. This
interesting.
guy, I'll pull up some of the stats I had on him. This guy, this was one I was looking for. He got tracked at 21.4 miles per hour on the Ohio State defense. This guy is a 6'2", 285-pound man running over 21 miles per hour. This guy is a physical freak. Um, you know, he's matched that with this year. He had 5 sacks last year, 2 sacks this year, but he added 5 hits and 19 hurries this year, up from 7 last year. So he is getting pass rush production. 85.2 pass rush grade, 69.9 run defense grade, 88.7 pass rush grade, and 18.2 pass rush win rate with a 7.6 run stop grade. Those are some really impressive numbers, man.
He's a guy that we've been paying attention to because he has a lot of upside. But yeah, I mean, this is actually probably a good spot to take him. I'm thinking about it. Like he's got the pass rushing chops here that you can say, all right, if I have a pass rusher like him to put next to Dexter Lawrence, it really relieves some pressure on the other guys in my edge room. But I don't think that necessarily takes away the approach of going BPA here, right? I'm not going offense defense like that. I'm thinking about what's best for the team, adding talent. So he's an option. Audric Estime sounds like a really good option here.
Yeah,
Um,
that's who originally caught my eye, 'cause especially with Bucky Irving gone, and I mean, he's had a fantastic year. I mean, look at these numbers,
yeah,
93.9 PFF grade, 93.6 rushing grade, 90.3 zone grade, 90.2 gap grade,
yeah,
120.9 elusiveness grade, 4.27 yards after contacts per attempt, 8th in the country for yards after contact with 89.2, 61 missed tackles forced, 22 carries of 15 yards or more. I mean, what a season by this guy.
and the running back room, much like the wide receiver room, in my opinion, requires a bit of a basketball building approach. You want different style running backs who do different things. You have Saquon Barkley, presumably. We really don't know what's going to happen there, but I mean, I think it's fairly safe to assume he's here at least for another year at minimum. You drafted Eric Gray. They haven't used him much this year, but it's not like we're going to throw the guy away. He's a receiving threat, out of the backfield and a good runner and an elusive runner. He's just not a power back. Um, Estimate, and in many ways, Eric Gray does a lot of the things that, maybe not as well, but he does a lot of the things that you would want Bucky Irving to do, as that receiving type back if you use him correctly.
Mhm.
Estime is the kind of player we do not have.
No.
He's a big bruising back. He is elusive. He's physical. He gets a lot of yards out of contact through like physical contact. Um, I've called him Baby Bettis. because it's a lazy take because he's from Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But he has a similar running style to Bettis. He looks like he should be a guy who's just plodding forward and just gaining yardage by being big, but he's a lot quicker and a lot more elusive than you would expect for somebody his size. Um, I'm just trying to now imagine the offense of, the just what we can do with now an improved offensive line, a new receiver in Brian Thomas, JJ McCarthy as your new young running quarterback running things, and now you add a guy like Estime to the room to complement Saquon Barkley, right? Complement
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley as your bruising back. Saquon becomes a guy you can start reducing his workload in terms of dirty yardage, and he becomes more of like that weapon that you can use in the receiving game and outside runs, home run hitting type approach to things. And Estime can be your power bruiser who still gets a lot of yards after contact. I'm getting kind of excited about what this offense can do with that addition, and I think he is the best player available. Unless you have anybody else that you want to throw in the mix here.
No, for me, man, it comes down between Michael Hall and Estimate, and both the picks really excite me, man. I mean, like I said, I think Estimate would be a great fit to this room. I think it's great value here in the fourth round, and this is the type of area you want to target adding to that running back room. But on the same hand, man, Michael Hall Jr. is a guy that we were excited about the upside going into the year. And the way I look at this, where I'm going to make a case for Michael Hall Jr., is that anytime, and we didn't do it last time, but anytime I can get an upside player in the hands of the best coach in our team, in my opinion, and Andre Patterson, and let him get a chance to get a really upside player and develop him into a potential future star. I think I'd want to do it. And I think he could really benefit playing next to Dexter Lawrence and having Andre Patterson as coach. I think this could be a true difference maker, opposed to Audric Esme, I think, would be a great player, but I think you're adding him to be a committee back and potentially the lead of the committee down the line. But to me, I think Michael Hall Jr. gives you the chance of being like a true, like you would talk about how you want to eventually find like an all pro player in these third, fourth rounds. I
Absolutely.
don't think you're doing that necessarily with Estime. I mean, if you do, you'd still running back at the end of the day. Like it's huge, but it's not the same difference. I think Michael Hall, I'm not ready to like say he's gonna be a franchise changing player. It's a huge road ahead of him to get there. But I see with the coaching and the players around him, I think with his upside, he could get there. So I think I'm gonna make the case for Michael Hall Jr. here. How do you feel?
I like your argument. You're swinging for the all pro here, the all pro potential at least. And presumably, you still have Andre Patterson here. Um, no, it's a strong case.
And I want to
I don't,
develop. And you mentioned that I want, as long as Andre Patterson's here, I want to develop as much interior defensive lineman under him for as long as we have him.
well, also, I think that if you added an edge rusher, hopefully, somebody to be an edge two in free agency, adding Michael Hall Jr. to that defensive line now really, really solidifies what you're doing because you've got your offense minus Estime in this situation, which is still a damn good offense, in my opinion. It's got a really good potential. And on defense now, you've got Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, Michael Hall Jr., and presumably, let's say Daniil Hunter, all right, or a Josh Uche. Not that they're the same, but those are, I think, two realistic targets they could go after and sign to be their other edge rusher. And you've added Jeremiah Trotter Jr. as well to stand next to Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden. Your front seven is all of a sudden terrifying.
Yes.
It's terrifying to defenses, and that's a front seven that any coordinator can work with.
Yep.
Even if Wink Martindale's not here. So, and again, if Michael Hall Jr. if he hits his athletic upside with uh with our coaching staff, you're right. This is a guy you can see becoming an all pro bowler. He has that kind of talent. Winning pass rush win rates, we talked about them for edge rushers. If they
Dude, that's what I was
cross
looking at.
if for an edge rusher, if an edge rusher crosses 20%, that's elite territory. The guys who are 15 to 20% are like the really like the next level, like really, really good guys to project out. This guy, defensive lineman, you see numbers like 8%,
Yeah,
6%,
it was
right?
very good at
That
8%.
right. Michael Hall Jr. has a pass rush win rate of 18.2%
Isn't that nutty?
as a three tech. As a three tech.
He has 19 hurries.
Yeah. Now, the downside to him is he's only 6'2", right? And we just talked about how, they value length.
Yeah,
But
he doesn't have that.
I think the way he plays would more than make up for it. So you talked me into it, man. Let's take the upside swing here. Take Michael Hall Jr.
Yeah, and I think you could still get your estimate type even in free agency. Like I don't have the list in front of me, but I don't even know if he's a free agent. But you could get like the James Conner types probably pretty cheap in free agency and still add, get that bruiser to take some reps away from Saquon. You're not getting a upside guy like Michael Hall Jr. in free
No,
agency.
that's a very fair point. Take him. Make the pick.
All right.
All right.
I'm
So that's
happy about that pick after we talked
so
about it.
so let's stop and recap again. We got our quarterback with JJ McCarthy round 1. In rounds 2, we took Jordan Morgan, our new right tackle slash guard. We also took Brian Thomas Jr., our new outside wide receiver. In the third round, we took Jeremiah Trotter Jr., the linebacker from Clemson, who is definitely the best linebacker in this class. And we got our hands on Michael Hall Jr. in the fourth round, the interior defensive lineman, more of a three tech from Ohio State, who has enormous upside and is already an outstanding pass rusher to pair with Andre Patterson and develop and unlock his game. That's a pretty darn good haul for the first 6 picks. We've added you know, I'm sorry, 5 picks, right?
Yep.
So for 5 picks, we've added 3 impact offensive players and 2 impact defenders. And those 2 impact defenders have already taken our front seven and really made it a lot better. So we have 2 more picks to go. So now we're getting into like the later part of the draft, our fifth round pick and our sixth round pick. There are things we have not addressed yet. We haven't addressed our defensive backfield. I think
Yep.
that's the one that's glaring right here. We could always add another tight end. We could add another receiving weapon depending on who's on the board. We haven't added a running back. To me, those are the 2 areas that stand out most. Not that I would force a pick, but I would be curious who the best defensive backs are on the board and who the best running backs are on the board. Uh, and obviously who's listed as the best player on the board. So tell us who's there at what is it, pick 145?
Yep. And honestly, there's some really interesting names. Also, shout out, man, we had some guys who went off just before these picks that I would have loved here. Um, at 142, we lost Roman Wilson.
Mm.
At 143, we lost Braylon Allen from Wisconsin.
Oof. That would have
That
been a
would have
good
been
pick.
the pick, dude.
Yeah.
Braylon Allen, a 19-year-old running back. See if they pull up. I can pull up. I can, dude. 6'2", 245. A 19-year-old running back who's if he plays in his bowl game, will run for over 1,000 yards 3 years in a row, over 10 touchdowns 3 years in a row, at 5.4 yards carries or more every single year. I mean, that would have been a pick that I would have loved here. Unfortunately, we can't make that pick, but I think that would have been my no-brainer. But some names that do interest me regardless. I think can assume Shiloh Sanders is going to go back to school if we're assuming
Mhm.
Shador is going back. But hey, my guy for you, Max Melton out of Rutgers. That's a guy we talked about in the cornerback episode.
It's an outside
Another
corner. Yeah.
Yep. Another my guy for me, Dalen Holker, tight end from Colorado State. One of the most
Mm-hmm.
productive tight ends in the country. Um, Cooper Beebe. I think so. Let's put this out here. Coop, we can take him. We can potentially talk about that being the option. I think
He
he's the
won't be
clear
there.
DPA, but he won't be here. So I think
No. This is
unless
this is
we
a
were
this is a glitch in the PFF board. There's no way I see Cooper Beebe getting out of the top 100.
Yep. So, although he should be the pick here, I think there's enough players that we can talk about where we don't have to just kind of like be like, well, pick somebody. Like we're knowledgeable enough on the players left here that we should go ahead and look other. So Ricky Pearsall, from Florida, he's had a really good year. He's the one who had that OBJ type catch earlier in the year. He's had a really good year. Um, and look right here, Mike Sanistro, or Sanistro. How do you
Mm,
say his name?
Mike Sandstro.
Sanistro. He's
Sandstro, yeah.
one of the BPAs here. So, and James Williams, safety out of Miami. That's another guy we talked about. Um,
He was the guy who was the actual five-star recruit the year that they found Cam Kinchins, who was, I think, their 16th highest recruit to their own class. Of course, Cam Kinchins became a first-round talent. Wilson, it didn't develop the same way, but he's still he's a very good player. I think, what is he like? He's like 6'4". He's a big safety. So
yeah, let's
he's
see.
interesting.
He is 6'5",
Yeah.
215.
He's a big
Yeah.
dude. He's built like a linebacker and he's playing safety, but he's interesting. I'm not necessarily enthralled with guys who are just monstrous size. I want guys who are athletes who can be impact players. That's been, if you think about it, the theme of our class has been impact players, right? Guys who come in and have a boom effect on the roster. Um,
One,
I
I'll
like
see one
Mac.
more.
uh, Go ahead.
One more. So we talked about running backs. I mean, I'm mad Braylon Allen for us because that would have been the pick. I didn't think I would have argued it here, but Frank Gore Jr. is on the
Yes, I was
board
going to
here.
bring him up. Yeah, I was going to ask you about him. Frank Gore Jr. is really someone worth talking about. I don't recall. Was he one of my guys? I think he might have
No,
been, but
but I
he
don't think
wasn't.
he was. But we talked. I
Well,
know you and I talked about
I
him.
love this guy. So this is the son of NFL Hall of Famer Frank Gore, uh, who was obviously went to Georgia and was a famous back on the Niners most predominantly. Um, Played forever, has enormous rushing yardage, and his all-time stats are incredible. He's productive for many years. Frank Gore Jr. Is having a fantastic run, but he's at Southern Miss. He's not at a Power Five school, so that you can hold against him. But his production is incredible. I mean, he had a 90 rushing grade, 88.5 zone rushing grade. He was a 78.9 gap grade. Um, his elusive rating was high. It was 105.4. He gets 3.6 yards after contact, which is really high. Um, he's a threat out of the backfield as a receiver. He had 27 receptions this year out of 36 targets. He had 1,119 yards on the ground, another 224 in the air. He's a very productive back. This is one where I'm tempted. I don't know if I would pass up on some of the other high-end talent for Frank Gore Jr. at this spot, though, because
Yeah,
you mentioned some real good names on defense here. Um, so I'd like to, if you're okay with it, go back to the defensive guys here.
I agree. I'll also just mention 5'8", 195. So he is a smaller guy. That's a knock
Mhm.
against him. But we love those NFL bloodlines. Those guys just look
They,
like
they
they know what they're doing better than the guys who aren't.
and they tend to hit. So I would, it would hurt if we passed up on them and we lost out on them. But I just think that there's better talent on the board here. So
I
to
agree.
me, of the names you mentioned, this comes down to either Max Melton or Mike Sanderstill.
I
Um,
same page with you.
Max Melton is worth recapping. I don't know if you have our notes.
I can pull
He's
it
a
up in a second.
he was I think he was my guy. He's from Rutgers, the brother of Bo Melton, the wide receiver who came out of Rutgers a couple of years ago in the draft. Who is, I'm trying to remember where he went. The Seahawks, I think. But um, Max Melton's a really good. He's a really good cornerback. He's an outside corner. I think he's 6 feet, 190 pounds, if I recall. Um,
Yep.
I'm not looking at it, but I remember his claim to fame was he put up some really good reps against Marvin Harrison Jr. And that's where he put himself on the map. Like he was able to kind of hang with the best wide receiver in the country and cover him, whether he lined up inside, outside. He kind of followed him around. So he is a versatile quarterback. He has length. He has a good wingspan. I don't know what his exact measurables are going to come in as, but you can see it on tape. Like he uses his length to break up passes. He can run with guys. I don't think he's going to test in an elite way, but I think he's going to test in a good way. Um, So if the Giants want to take, I mean, this is good value here. If you get a guy who you think could be a potential starting cornerback, he is, especially an outside cornerback who's got some physicality to him. You can allow yourself to leave Cordell Flott in the slot. Um, I think that has value, but I'm going to be honest here. I actually think the most impactful player on the board right now is Mike Sainristil from Michigan. Um, that's the guy I'm looking at because I've mentioned him a couple of times now, and we should make mention of what comes out of Michigan. This guy was a wide receiver who was converted to safety. He plays that sort of hybrid nickel role where he can run with wide receivers. He can take on assignments where he's helping in the box. He's become a very good and physical tackler. He has the ball skills of a wide receiver, which he was. And as the season has gone on in Michigan, he's gotten better and better. You can see that in his grades. Like he just got better and better and better and became more impactful playing next to Rod Moore, who I don't know where he went. I'm sure he went in like the third round or something because he's a very good safety too.
Hmm.
But Sanders still fits that, that eraser role, right? That to take away the modern NFL threats, the guys who are wide receivers slash running backs coming out of the backfield who are running all sorts of things on the route tree, you need somebody who has the athleticism and the physicality to handle those different assignments. Adding this guy to the mix with Xavier McKinney, assuming he's back, and Jason Pinnock, this guy can play corner for you and allow you to move Cordell Flott outside, or you can just leave him as a third safety, right? And he can help out there, but he's basically positionless in many ways. And I like the idea of this positionless defensive back who can be an eraser. So I'm just now thinking about, again, a defensive room where you've added Trotter Jr. and Hall in the last two picks. So now your front seven again is Kayvon Thibodeau, Michael Hall Jr., Dexter Lawrence, and some edge you added in free agency theoretically. And we're hoping for a good one, like again, Hunter or Uche or somebody like that. And now your linebackers, your starting linebackers are Bobby Okereke, Michael McFadden, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr., which is actually a pretty fearsome front seven. You've already got McKinney, you've got Deontay Banks, you've got Jason Pinnock as a second safety. Adding this guy, you've got Cordell Flott, who can be a versatile cornerback. Adding a guy like Sanders still, in my opinion, gives you that much more versatility with that defensive backfield. It allows Wink Martindale to do so many things. We know he likes to have positionless guys back there, so he can run different coverages and fool the offense and disguise what he's doing. Sanders still really helps towards that cause. So this is, to me, if we have Wink Martindale here, and I'm hoping we do, I think Sanderson would be an outstanding pick. So that's my long-winded way of saying get the Michigan well-coached player here.
So, a couple things to say. Before I dive into Sanderson, I just wanted because I did pull it up some of the notes we had on Max Melton. He is the brother of Bo Melton, wide receiver for the Packers. Like
Us
you like,
Packers, that's right. Yeah.
yep. As you mentioned, Melton competed well with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Ibuka. Very, very like good competition with those guys. You know, we said he had baseline athleticism for the NFL. We said he was sticky. He was smart. He was a trash talker. He had the mentality you wanted in a cornerback, and he had good spatial awareness. So, really just solid player. But I think you really did sell me on Mike Sanders show. I was looking up to see if he was a freak list guy because these Michigan guys always are always freaks. They always are. He was not, but in one of the spots where they were talking a Michigan player, they mentioned some other guys who could have been a freak list, and he did make the honorable mention there where he said that he has a 40-inch vertical and
Wow.
he has a bounded up reactive plyo stairs. I really don't know what's a good number on that, but he had a 2.26 seconds is what they said. So apparently it's good. I don't know too much about that drill, so but I know for sure 40-inch vertical is an explosive number. So that will help make up for some of his size deficits there for
Is
sure.
that the workout where they put resistance bands on your legs to restrict your movement as you go up and down? It
Sounds
might
right.
be. Yeah, but I mean it's just I think it's just measuring sort of like fast twitch muscles and their ability to go up and down. But yeah, I mean he's an athlete and you can see it on film. So I'm for the sake of this exercise, I am assuming that Wink Martindale is our defensive coordinator, even though I said he's probably 70-30 to go. I don't want to believe it. So, and I just like the idea of a positionless guy adding to this defense and just talent. So that's my pitch. If you agree, pull the trigger.
Yeah, and look, even if he's not, like, we have a fantastic defensive back coach in Jerome Henderson. Jerome Henderson's one of the best in the league as a defensive back coach. I'd love to see him work with this guy, who was, a All-American in high school as a wide receiver, came in, made the switch in just 2022, and look at those stats. 83.5 coverage grade, 76.2 run defense grade, 83 point oh, they repeated this coverage game 3 times, but regardless, he 82.9 overall PFF grade. He's had a really, really good, season, and as you mentioned, he's played all around, so, I'm with you here. Let's go ahead and draft him, and I think you got a guy who will be an impact player on this defense, whether just as a guy who can play different areas or maybe eventually become a starter who can do
All right. So we've got three on offense. The first three picks are offense. The next three picks were defense. I don't think we did that on purpose. I think we kind of went with impact. We were just looking for impact BPA types. We got one pick left, assuming no trades. We're in the sixth round. Um, again, I'm on the just get talent here, but areas we have not addressed: running back and tight end. Um, and
that.
edge. We haven't really addressed edge, not in the draft at least. So, what do we have here?
So, running back, I mean, the name that pops off to me we can't take here is Raheem Rocket Sanders. He went back to college, so we
Yeah,
can't take him. They have Jason McClellan from Alabama here. He has pretty solid numbers. But Taj Brooks from Texas Tech. I don't know too much about him, to be honest, but wow. Actually, man,
yeah.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
do my research. I don't know if you know enough about it, but look at this. 91 missed tackles forced. That's something that I really look for in running backs. I think
Number one in the country.
number 1 in the country. That's I'll say when I look at running backs and I try to find these guys, the ability to force missed tackles in yards after contact are two things that I look for above almost everything else. And he's 5th in the country with 919 yards after contact and 91 missed tackles forced. As a Big 12 guy, I should probably know more about him, but I really don't. He's 5'10, 230.
Oh, he's a
Wow.
truck.
So, I mean, if we're taking
Interesting.
running back, this is definitely an interesting name
Bet
here.
bet bet on trades. Bet on
Yeah.
trades. The trades being humongous fucking running back.
Bowling
And
ball, dude.
yeah, so no, those are impressive numbers. The yards after contact numbers are really fascinating here. The yard and just the missed tackle rates, that's impressive. And I'm assuming, the way I don't want to guess actually. I haven't looked at his tape, so I really don't know what this guy is about. It sounds interesting.
1,451 yards,
91
5.5
rushing
yards
grade.
per attempt, 9
Man, that
touchdowns.
doesn't have a
Man,
lot. Actually has 23 receptions and 29 targets. That's not bad for a running back. That's pretty
yeah,
good.
and one thing I say a lot with running backs, and look, there obviously are the exceptions, who are, the Christian McCaffreys of the world, who are special receivers, but for the most part, I look at the running back position as the do's and the do nots as receivers. It's either you can catch the ball or you can't. And obviously, some guys do it better, but it's really if you can't do it, then that's a huge problem. But as long as you can do it, I don't have like most of the time it's just dumping off the ball. They're not asking you to do anything special if you're 99% of running backs.
What are the other players here other than running back?
Yes, because considering we can't speak too much to Taj Brooks, let's get look at some others. One thing you mentioned, we could still go tight end. We haven't done tight end yet. Ben Sanat. This was a guy from our tight end episode. This is a guy
M-
you were a huge fan of and is having a really
Z-
good year. I mean, coming off 2022, he was a guy that you were a big fan of, and he's really taken the next step. 81 receiving grade, 2 yards per route run, which is high for a tight end. Run block grade is 75.8. This guy is 6'4", 245. I can pull up some of the notes we have on him, but what do you remember about what you liked about Ben Sinnott?
He was a 0-star recruit. That's what I liked about him. He was a
Yeah.
zero-star recruit. If I recall, he went and played at Iowa for a while or Iowa State. I'm trying to remember where he went initially, and then he came or he committed there. But in any case, Bensonot's a guy who's had to, no scholarship, work his way up, and has worked his way up towards the top of this particular year's tight end room. It's not a great room, not like last year's class, but I remember this guy just being a solid all-around tight end, a very good pass receiver, a good route runner. I remember that about him. I have to go back to the notes, but I remember thinking he was a very good route runner for his size.
Yep, I remember
And
that as well.
and one of these guys who like is a bit of a cheat code, right? When you talk about like the kind of tight ends that add value to an organization are the guys who can really be good pass receivers, but also reliable run game blockers so that they can mask what they do. I think he does fit that mold very well, and he runs good enough routes where he becomes a threat in the over the middle game. He was a decent runner. I don't think he was somebody who would like run away from guys, but he was solid after contact. Um, his receiving grade is excellent. He has good yak. I mean, yak matters for tight ends. It's not great, but he gets about 6.8 yards after a catch
I love
reception. That's
I
pretty good.
love Yak and tight ends. I think
Right.
they're
I mean
really
that. I
underrated.
mean, right. I mean, it just speaks to guys finding the spot, the open spot in the zone, and being able to drag defenders for a few extra yards. I like Bensonot, man. Now we have Daniel Bellinger, who I think already fits this mold, to be totally honest, and we have Darren
Yep.
Waller. So to me, if we're trading Darren Waller or whatever, if we decide we're moving on for him after this year, which to me won't make a lot of sense, but if we are, I'm very interested in Bensonot here. I really am. If we're not trading Darren Waller, as much as I like Bensonot, I think guys like him can be found in almost every draft class.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
So I do have our notes on him. So this is what we had on him. You mentioned zero-star recruit. We said he was a quality athlete. He was a hands catcher. He's a versatile player. He's a guy, they lined up as fullback and things like that. He throttles well at the stem,
uh
snaps in and out of his breaks. It's good controlled speed. He's a solid blocker who plays low. Um, he said he does occasionally get beat as a blocker with using bad angles. That's one of the negatives we had him. But we did say tough runner, good athlete. He high points balls well. He has good ball concentration and good change of direction ability. So a lot of
I remember
positives
the
on him.
I remember the blocking problem was in space.
Yes.
It wasn't at the line of scrimmage. It was more like running in space and blocking to open up, runs for receivers with the ball in their hand. Where sometimes he would take awkward angles and just misjudge angles on safeties and blocking in space, which it matters. It's important, but I don't think it's a game changer necessarily for him. I'm still thinking about him here. I really am. I mean, I like the talent. Who are the other guys that you mentioned? The running back. Are there any other running backs there? Are there any other players that are catching your eye here that are just talented?
Um, One player that's catching my eye is Keith Randolph Jr. from Illinois. This is the running mate of Johnny Newton. He's
Yep.
had kind of seemingly a down year. He has 79 grade last year. It's only 65.3, 3 sacks, 2 hits, 8 hurries. But I mean, I remember these 2 guys are kinda like they were the stars of that defense, 6'5", 305 pounds. If we didn't address interior defensive line, I would definitely be more pushing for this. He was a really good running mate for Johnny Newton, but probably not the way I would go. There's Tyron Hopper, the linebacker from Missouri. I remember we looked into him a little bit. 6'2", 221. He's a smaller linebacker, has some athleticism. Um, Jordan Birch from Oregon is a solid edge player. Only 62.1 pass rush grade, 76.7 run defense grade, 10.4% run stop rate. He's more of a run stop guy. 3 sacks this year, but that Oregon front is really good. But looking through this, I think for me, it comes down to Sanat, who was, a guy we talked about in our tight end episode, and a guy who I clearly have to look a lot more into is Taj Brooks. I mean, though he hits all the metrics I look for in a tight end, and it's a position that we failed as much as we wanted to address. Um, I think this is despite not knowing as much as I wish I did, I think this is the place I wanna lean on him. I can come we'll come back next week in the Q&As and mailbag and talk about this guy a little bit, but, I for because we missed his position, it's one I really wanna address, and these numbers are very intriguing to me. I think this is where I wanna go. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I knew more about him, I would take him. Um, I really would. I would if I can't say I know much about the player here. I'm being very honest with everybody watching. I just haven't
Yeah,
watched this film, so we're going basically based on data. And data matters like when it's how we find players sometimes as we look through these data,
and then you watch the film.
charts, and then you go back and watch a film and say, "Yep, it matches," or it doesn't match, and so um, I don't know the answer to this question. Um, I don't think there's a compelling enough reason to take a tight end here, given our current status,
Mhm.
that you have to take Sanat, although Sanat really intrigues me as a player.
Yeah,
Um, I would strongly consider taking him especially if we were trading Darren Waller,
yeah,
and I think that's where you would make it argument because then you'd have an extra pick or two to use on your running back somewhere else. Um, but I'm with you. I think, if you're seeing insane numbers like that, forgive us for giving you a pick that is on a guy that we haven't watched film on, but I can't deny those numbers. Those numbers are ridiculous. So what we can do is take Brooks here and promise you guys will go watch his film and bring it back
yeah.
on the next episode or something and tell you all about him.
And I'll say, even if I don't love his tape, if his tape is just, fine, as long as I don't hate it. Look, in the 6th round, when you have a need at running back, he has the size, he has the numbers. At this point, it's worth taking the risk and seeing if he can translate that to the next level, even if it doesn't look
That's-
as projectable on tape.
and he sounds like it's the way it sounds like we're talking about it like one of these bowling ball running backs, not necessarily an outside zone runner or something like that. So
Yeah,
I think I like the idea that adding that to the room. So pull the trigger, man. Take this guy, and then we'll watch his film later.
sounds good. By the way, uh, the Raiders won 63-21.
I just saw that.
Yeah.
Brandon
Good for Antonio
Staley.
Pierce, man.
Yeah. Staley. Whew. Anyway. um, that's our class, right? I think we're done.
Yep. So it's
Let's
about
read.
to finish this draft, and it'll show our recap.
We're gonna get a terrible grade because we didn't care about the
They're gonna hate
PFF
JJ.
ranking.
They're gonna hate JJ.
It's gonna get an F. Don't judge us by the grade. We don't care about that. What do
All
we
right.
get? An F
We
for
get a
JJ, I
C
bet.
plus overall.
Okay, because again, an F for JJ, right?
F for JJ, B minus on Jordan Morgan, B plus on Brian Thomas Jr., A minus on Jeremiah Trotter Jr., B on Michael Hall Jr., a lot of juniors, B minus on Mike Stanistrell, and C plus on Taj Brooks.
Yeah. So forget about the grade because the grade is based on how closely you align your pick to what they consider to be the BPA and alignment of need and positional value. And we have our own evaluation process, which I think, in my opinion, is going to fall closer to reality. But we'll see. But our approach here, let's summarize it. Quarterback is a day one problem for the Giants. Um, we took our quarterback here at pick 8. We took JJ McCarthy. I'm willing to bet that if we had taken Jaden Daniels, this thing would have given us a higher grade. But
Yeah, or Bo Nix.
or Bo Nix, yeah, they have Bo Nix higher because Trevor Sikkema loves Bo Nix, and
Yeah.
he creates this thing. So we went with our guy. We're assuming for a second that this is the guy that Joe Shane would target and say, I want the guy with the traits to develop at quarterback, the young guy with all the physical traits and who has some really darn good film. I want this guy, and I'm going to develop him with Brian Dable. So even if you don't agree with this specific player, the philosophy is clear. We're not messing around here. We're taking our quarterback in our pick day one. And that's why I'm not panicking about like the wins and losses. I think that there are guys that should be available that the Giants should be able to take and say, we got our quarterback day one, let's move on.
Yep.
It made life a lot easier, as you saw after that, right? It took kind of the stress off the rest of the draft because now you're like, all right, we can
Yep.
just address our needs and go BPA and see what happens. So with the second round first pick, we took Jordan Morgan, left tackle, well, offensive tackle from Arizona. He plays left tackle now, but a really good balanced offensive lineman who can who can be versatile on the line and I think can be a plug and play right tackle in case we need him to. But if Evan Neal hits, it's a guy you can easily start as a guard inside and help out the line, make it better. With our next pick in the second round, the one we got from Seattle for the Leonard Williams trade, we're taking Brian Thomas Jr., 6'3", 205, strong outside receiver. Um, our new X receiver, right, with speed, strength, the whole bit. Very good at contested catches. And then Jeremiah Trotter Jr., the linebacker from Clemson, at the next pick, who was clearly the BPA there. Michael Hall Jr., the defensive lineman from Ohio State, with the next pick to pair with uh, Jerome Henderson and obviously Dexter Lawrence, a guy with enormous pass rushing chops and a lot
Andre
of physical
Patterson.
upside. I'm sorry, Andre Patterson. Um, and then Mike Sanderstill, the nickelback from Michigan. And then Brooks, the running back we've not watched.
Yeah,
With our
the
final,
unknown, but
yeah.
interesting, man.
Right.
Yeah, I
So what do you
mean,
think? So what's your forget about the PFF grade? Tell me what you think. What does our team look like after this class? How are you feeling?
I feel really good about this draft, to be honest with you. I mean, obviously we took kind of our guy here in JJ, and I would be fine too if we took Jaden Daniels like we did in the other one. If they have conviction about a quarterback, go take them. And I'm just happy that we went and addressed the position. And I think there's multiple guys in this draft who are worthy of this of being taken in the first round. And JJ it's projectable player, and I know people won't love this pick, but I think as time goes by, if he declares he's a guy who'll grow on you. Jordan Morgan, man, I think it was the right pick to do because there is a lot of good offensive tackles at the top of this board, and you're really just playing to the strength of the draft by taking one here. Um, I have some worries if he can go inside just because we haven't seen it. I would obviously prefer like a Troy Fontenot. He wasn't here, obviously, but but I do think Jordan Morgan is a good pick, and
Yeah.
you know,
Fountain would have been the pick if he was there. I think that's pretty clear. We would have taken him over Morgan.
yep.
But I think Morgan is an exciting prospect as a tackle slash guard. At the end, he improves your O line room. I think that's how I look at it.
Yep, and I think he can play guard, and I do think Evan Neal at tackle is enough of a concern where you really do have to take a guy who has tackle guard versatility because you really might need a tackle. And Jordan Morgan, I trust more than the other guys we talk about moving outside. He's a good football player. I'm happy with that pick. He's a good value. Brian Thomas, like you mentioned, big guy, one of the best deep threats the in college football. I think JJ McCarthy, who has a hose of an arm, will be able to use him well. And I think he matches up well with Jalen Hyatt on the other side, playing. And I think Brian Thomas can be our X. Jeremiah Trotter, love Jeremiah Trotter. He was a guy that I fell in love with when we watched his tape. He's just one of the most clean players in this entire draft. He looks like an NFL player already. They gave us an A minus on this one, and I think they're right to do that because I think this probably was our best pick of the draft. I don't think he should fall to round 3, but linebackers do sometimes, man. Off ball linebackers aren't very valued, and although it worries me if we have Wink Martindale still exactly like how often we can get this guy on the field because for once we have 2 good linebackers. Has not happened to us in a very long time. But I think Jeremiah Trotter at the end of the day is a good football player, and you take good football players and needs change really quickly. Um, Michael Hall Jr., that was one that I petitioned for a little bit. Like I said, Andre Patterson, Dexter Lawrence, his athleticism, his upside, I think he'll fill into that Leonard Williams role to an extent. Your guy, Mike Sandstrom, get him with Jerome Henderson, versatility, athleticism, 40-inch vert. I think
Ball
that is
skills.
yeah, ball
Ball
skills.
skills. Yeah.
A guy you get former wide receiver who just switched in 2022 to D back and is already putting up productive numbers there. I like the upside there. I love guys who switched positions and are already showing upside. I think that just shows how much more they could grow. And then except finally Taj Brooks. I mean, look, I have to watch him. He has the size and he has the numbers I look for. Like I said, the after contact yards and missed tackles forced, those are 2 numbers that I look above all rest in, running backs, and he is some of the best in the country. I have to look into this guy because I'm excited about what I see, and I'm hoping his tape matches the numbers.
I'm thinking about our depth chart now and our roster after we put this draft class into the mix. We don't know what free agents they'll go after. I'm hoping, like I said, I keep saying it. I hope they sign one of these edge rushers, an impact edge rusher, to
Mhm.
pair with Kayvon Thibodeau. Um, but man, the idea of having two high-end talents like Trotter Jr. and Michael Hall Jr. added to that front seven, which is
Yep.
already beginning to show dominant signs, is, especially if you have another edge rusher thrown in the mix and you're mixing in Azeez Ojulari as like a rotational edge rusher, you're talking about the makings of just a dominant front seven, an absolutely dominant front seven,
Which is the
and a
goal.
defense. Yeah, and then you got a defensive back room full of athletes, if you think about it, right? Xavier McKinney, Deontay Banks, Mike Sanders still, Jason Pinnock, guys. All these guys have ball skills. They all can cover. They all can come down and tackle. They all have the same kind of skill set, if you think about it, right? They can be used in the run game and run support. They're outstanding in coverage. They all have good ball skills. And Deontay Banks is a guy we said we doesn't have good ball skills coming up, but he has some picks. He's
Yeah.
making plays on the ball, so he's showing ball skills here. He's breaking up passes. He's doing good. He had a great breakup of a pass in the game against the Packers. You're seeing a prototype of a defensive backfield develop, and I like that. Right, that these
Yeah.
guys can mix and match, and they're physical, they're strong, they're fast, ball skills. They're interchangeable parts. It makes it hard for offenses to game plan for these guys. So I really love what the defense is looking like with this on offense. Like you said, the depth chart has improved. The quarterback room, most importantly, has improved substantially with the addition of McCarthy into the mix. And like I said, you could pick whatever quarterback you want there, but one of these top five guys added into the mix. Um, Adding the running back that can be a bruiser, hopefully, we have to look into his tape to add to the running back room will help. But adding a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. really it really kind of rounds out that wide receiver room, I think. I think that's what's
Yeah.
missing in that room right now. It's a nice addition and it gives the offense so much more flexibility to be able to hit the deep ball on either side with Hyatt or Thomas. They're both speedsters, although this guy's more physical. And I think, and guys who can run good routes, and Wandale Robinson will be allowed to eat underneath, right? When you have Waller and these guys running around, if you have a quarterback who can get the ball there, and just having a guy like the offensive lineman Morgan in the mix to improve the room, hopefully with a new coach. This is starting to look like a team that, if, depending on the pace at which the quarterback you take develops, could be a contender within a year or two. A legitimate contender. You're talking about putting together a pretty darn good roster. We didn't have to make any trades. We didn't have to do anything crazy. We just sat still and took our guys. I like this class, man. I feel really good about the roster after this draft class. I'd be pumped if we walked away with a draft class like
Yeah.
this.
This draft class really excites me. I think you got a lot of players who will fit this team, and then you went BPA, like, basically, round 2 and beyond, you really went with it, and, Sinister, like you mentioned, dude, like, we've seen some of these guys like Deontay Banks, who wasn't a ball hawk in a college or to throw it in the NFL, but it's nice to get a guy who has proven ball skills coming into the NFL and know what you're getting because we really, this is the first year we've kind of see that come to fruition where we really haven't had a guy with ball skills. The guy, the reason we wanted Emmanuel Forbes, and I think you add that with him, and Cordo Flott, you might be a guy who can play outside for you. 6 foot. He's a guy who did a little bit in camp, and you can try that now, and he might be able to get the opportunity, and you can feel comfortable playing Sandstrom in at slot, and hopefully be a guy who can be a little bit of a ball hawk out of there. Yeah, man, I like it. Hall Jr. I think you get your Leonard Williams replacement, and
It, it's
it might
it,
take
it's
some
just a
time.
It's a good class. I mean, this is what you do, right? Like you can't assume, and we talk about this in the draft, you can't build Rome in a day. You can't fit
Yep.
every need, and you shouldn't be drafting for need. You should really be aiming to get the best players, the most projectable athletes. You should aim for those kinds of guys so you can have the potential to hit an all-pro home run. That's what the 49ers do. That's what the Ravens do. The Ravens really just kind of sit back. We kind of did more of a Ravens approach here where they just sit back and say, let the best players fall to us, and we'll just take them. Everybody else is drafting
Yep.
for need and reaching here and there. We're just going to sit still and take the best player. And they do that. If you take that approach year after year after year in the draft, you're going to build up an outstanding roster. And who cares if you have redundancy at some position with quality guys? You can trade them. You
Yep.
can move guys. There are things you can do as long as you have talent. It's hard to trade a mediocre player because you took him to fill a need. It's easy to trade a really good player when you have a position of strength, right?
Yep.
So it's just you just take the best guys, make your roster as good as possible. You do a few drafts like this, in my opinion, and if enough of these guys hit, you've got yourself a contender. So I'm good with this. So that's our first 7 round mock. We'll be doing more of these as we get closer to draft season, but we wanted to do one before the season was over. Obviously, things can change where the Giants draft will change, and in all likelihood, somewhat a few times before the end of the season. But the philosophy has not changed. This entire draft class was based on the premise of you've got to get your quarterback round one way or another, and we chose to just pull the trigger and take it early, and then you can see it made our decision making a lot easier after that. And I think that's exactly how it would play out for Joe Shane. You breathe a sigh of relief. You got your quarterback, and you start building your roster some more. So you don't have to wait until you have a perfect roster to take a quarterback. There are
Yep.
other picks. This is a good class. I wish we had some more picks. We might get more picks. We'll see. Do you have any other closing thoughts before we shut this down for today?
No, man, I don't think I have anything. I'm trying to think. I think we have some bowl games coming up, don't we?
We got a few. I was looking at the schedule. So the bowls start this Saturday. You got all the New Mexico Bowl, the New Orleans Bowl, the Cure Bowl, Independence Bowl. But no, like I don't see any marquee matchups. I think it's a little early. An interesting one might be on Monday, December 18th, the Bahamas Bowl, Western Kentucky, with our guy Malachi Moore playing against Old Dominion. Old Dominion happens to have a very interesting player. We didn't mention him yet, but it's a linebacker by the name of Jason Henderson. Do you remember we talked about this guy? He
That
has the
sounds.
most he has the most tackles since Luke Kuechly.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
As a line, this guy had 187 tackles last year. Um, I was just looking up his stats to see where he was this year. So he had 186 last year total tackles in 12 games, and this year he had 170. 19 and a half tackles for a loss, 4.5 sacks. Insanely productive, plays at a small school, but this is a guy like, if the Giants want to get another linebacker or they don't take a linebacker, but they want to take a swing, he's a late round guy. You might be able to get him later in the draft or maybe even a UDFA, 6'1", 220, not a big guy, but somebody, I'm going to watch the game specifically to see Jason Henderson. So I'm going to be
There-
watching that one. You have your eye on any of these bowl games?
So one that's catched my eye based off this draft, the Independence Bowl, Cal versus Texas Tech, and we get a chance to check out Taj
Oh, there you
Brooks.
go.
We watch this Saturday, see if we made a good pick or not.
It's Saturday, 9:15 p.m. The Independence Bowl,
Yep,
California versus Texas Tech. All right, that's good. If you want to see Todd Brooks, I want to see Todd Brooks.
I
I'm gonna
do.
go see if we can find his coach's film like now. Um,
Yeah,
and
look after this.
yeah, I'm trying to look through these games and see if there's anything that catches my eye. Nothing crazy. No, never mind. Almost had something. No, I think we're good. I think then you get into like the next week, and I think the games they start getting a little bit better as we enter like the Christmas week. That's when a lot of the better bowl games start. So um, the national, the semifinal game doesn't happen until New Year's Eve, if I'm not mistaken. Or actually, no, New Year's Day, right?
I'm
I've got
not
to
sure.
look it up.
Let's see. Yeah, yeah, I think it's New Year's Day.
New Year's Day, the Rose Bowl
Yep.
and the Sugar Bowl. So the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day, 5 o'clock game is Alabama, the 5th seed versus the number 1 seed Michigan, and the Sugar Bowl is Texas, the 3 seed versus 2 seed Washington at 8:45 that night. That game's gonna be fun. That's a few weeks away. So got some bowl games, got some college football. I'll definitely be watching for certain players. Um, the Giants play on Sunday. We haven't talked about them at all, except for the
Oh,
coaching stuff.
hey,
Uh, hey,
it'll be fun.
it'll be fun. They're at New Orleans, 1 o'clock. Should be fun to see if DeVito sanity keeps going on.
Yeah,
But it's
probably
fun.
probably because we're okay with them winning probably means they'll lose.
Right. I've accepted anything at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap it up. I think that's an episode. As always, please follow us if you haven't already at He's a Giant Pod on Twitter. Follow me, Sal, at Queens_guy. Follow Monty at Monte Cristo at MONTECRI5TO. Please like us, review us, give us 5 stars on all the major platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. And with that, I'll leave it and end this thing, and I'll see you guys next week. Have a good week and go Giants.
Yeah, see you guys next week. Remember setting mailbag questions. Go Giants.